The personal thing.
It's like two adult children going back to school in my house,
Oh, well,
and they're not too happy either.
and they didn't, like, veto that before you walked out the
Are
door?
you kidding? They're trying to get in every minute of sleep that they can before class starts today.
Well, 9 o'clock.
He'll probably be back by the time the pledge is over.
Right.
Okay, in the back? Aye sign, do something.
Bolton? I don't think they're hearing us.
Guessing we're not good to go yet.
Okay, good morning, everyone. It's 9 o'clock. This is a Management and Planning Council and planning meeting of the Town Council of Fort Myers Beach. All council members are present. The town manager and the town attorney will start with the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay. First item on the agenda this morning is we've invited the Lee County Sheriff's Office down this morning to discuss the possibility of establishing this nuisance abatement board and some other matters that have come before us. This morning we have in ascending order. We have Captain Prisco from the Community Response Unit. We have Captain Blake Lee from who is the captain of the South District. We have Captain Brian Jacaki from our West District here, which includes Fort Myers Beach, along with Jeffrey Dektis, our lieutenant. And we have also with us Kara Everly, who is the program coordinator, and also Tiffany Wood, who is also in the office with the sheriff. So we'll start off with whoever representative wants to come up from the sheriff's office, and we can start the presentation here.
Nuisance enforcement?
That'd be fine.
Okay. Morning, ladies and gentlemen. I'm Captain Andy Prisco with the Community Response Unit. We have several different captains here today. My job is to attempt to answer any questions and go over the nuisance ordinance that we've been speaking about for the last few weeks. Captain Lee is going to talk about some of the enhanced community policing and enhanced policing proposal that we have, and Captain Jacaki will gladly answer any questions we have about numbers or stats pertaining to the district or any crimes associated therein. So I'll open it up with any questions that anybody may have regarding the specific nuisance ordinance. I know that two came over from the city manager. The first one that I'm aware of is that will the Lee County Sheriff's Office, do we feel that the nuisance ordinance that was provided will be effective to the city? And my response to that, first I need to know what is it that the board, the council, the city's trying to accomplish by enacting that ordinance, and it'll probably allow me to answer that a little bit better.
Anybody want to chime in on that?
Okay.
Yeah.
I had a conversation with Detective Menes in Fort Lauderdale, and he is the detective who's assigned to their nuisance abatement board. And I went through some of the cases they had, and they you know, I think their ordinance is a lot like our proposed ordinance. The way that the cases I tracked went was that there'd be a property that would be in violation. And this detective was the one who usually did the research, did the investigation, would go in front of the board would decide whether or not they're going to make them under their jurisdiction. And in every case, the property owners worked with the detective to do things like install lights, cameras, signs, no trespassing signs, shoo-away loiterers, whatever the detective thought would help with their property. And in the cases I looked at, and there's only a few that I did, the crime in the property went down. So one of my desires for this nuisance abatement board is if we can model something like that, where it's not a punitive thing, it's not really meant to go through and punish properties because we don't like them or because they have a bad perception, but actually a way to take properties and bring them into a more compliance to reduce criminal activity. Now, I read some of the other things you said about how this would work out, and the response that I saw from you guys was that you're not looking at having a sheriff officer necessarily assigned to drive the board like Detective Meneas is. You're looking at more, I guess, ARCO compliance people driving the board and then using the sheriff where it's necessary?
Yes, sir. So first, let me answer that. Listening to what you're trying to accomplish, we already have a lot of that in place. Through our community policing and the county, and you're talking about a municipality over in Fort Lauderdale, not the sheriff's office, correct?
Right, he's a detective.
Right, so obviously, the municipality has a lot more resources directed to the city function than we do as a county. However, we do have quite a bit of a large community response unit, and we do all of those things now. We can work with businesses, we can work with site surveys, SEPTED, crime prevention through environmental design, go and determine how bushes or lighting or new things can help reduce the crime. And quite honestly, I think Captain Jakacki has some information that will show you steadily just this year that the crime rate is already going in the right direction, down, without specifically addressing all of those things. But to answer your question, yes. The Lee County Sheriff's Office will be more than happy, as we do for other municipalities in the county, to provide a liaison, so to speak, to work with your code officers, your ordinance officers, to give certain information regarding the crimes. I saw the nuisance ordinance that was provided deals with 7 specific crimes that were identified in statute: murder, rape, gang activity, illicit sales of narcotics, aggravated assault, and aggravated battery. We are going to investigate those anyway. We're the law enforcement agency, so if we get a call from the board, from a complainant, from a councilman, or anybody that lives or visits here on the island regarding a crime, we're going anyway, and we're going to do a complete and thorough investigation. When that investigation is complete, the findings become public record. We can facilitate getting the board or your ordinance officer that information, and then you can review the circumstances surrounding that incident, and you can determine whether it meets the criteria of what the city wants to enact or address as a nuisance. And I think it was 2 times within a 6-month period for certain issues. But a lot of the things that you say, we already do. So I don't know that an ordinance would make it any more stricter, maybe the follow-up, but from the most part, in my experience, anything that we've addressed here on the island, the business owners, the rental agents, they've been more than happy to comply. So we've been getting good feedback, and I think we can show that the crime rate is already starting to go in the right direction, which is down.
Oh, I've heard some history of some places on the island that are no longer here, where there were like little hotels or whatever that were pretty much kind of drug houses where a lot of dealers went in and out. The one kind of missing piece I see that can be driven by the nuisance abatement board is that if the property owner is either negligent or complicit in the activity, but all you do is you can go through and you can target the drug dealers, let's say, on a property, but the property owner himself and the property itself can continue to be a hotbed of criminal activity if that property owner isn't conducive to your voluntary
Absolutely.
programs.
So we deal with that a lot in the unincorporated areas too. When we get a complaint of a possible drug house per se, whether it's an overt or covert investigation, we will do our due diligence and we will follow through. A lot of times we will have evidence, we will conduct search warrants, we will make arrests, we will seize narcotics, and if it continues to happen, we will contact property owners, we will contact the county. Ultimately, it's about people screening the people that are living in here and evicting those that are causing these issues. It is quite cumbersome sometimes, but maybe in that aspect, I probably would agree with you that if a board or a nuisance board would put more pressure on those people to try to vet their clients a little bit better, or who they're renting to, that could help out, because usually that takes longer in unincorporated areas. Out-of-state owners, people that we got to contact, find out who owns the property, try to contact them, let them know what's going on there. They got to review reports, and then they get back to us. But ultimately, it does work, because they do help us out. Sometimes not as soon as others, but it does work out in the end. So I do agree with you in that aspect. That would be very helpful.
Thank you.
Questions, comments?
The only thing I wanted to add to that is I think you clarified it pretty well, that your job is to do what you're continuing to do already, and that's investigate criminal activity. The board, in my eyes, is there to help facilitate you that you don't have to keep going back for the same reasons over and over and over again. It essentially levels the playing field for all the businesses on the island to have to comply to the same rules that everybody does. I don't think it necessarily is, as you said, you go, you investigate, it comes back, you know, you have your findings then, if it happens within two times and within a 6-month period, then it goes before the board, or can potentially go before the board, where they can do some addressing, add cameras, security, maybe do what they need to do to try to alleviate the problem so it doesn't continue to make resources needed by the Lee County Sheriff's Office to continue to do the same thing over and over and over again. This is not, in my eyes, a board that's out there to close a business down or you know, make sure your hedges are trimmed or anything. These are all very specific criminal activities that have to go before you, and I think people need to understand that you have to do your investigation before anything can be done by them. It's not something that can just, another layer of government, as people have referred to it, that are going to go in and shut a hotel down or a short-term rental or whatever company you want to use. I think it's important that people understand that. I think you did a very good job of explaining that, and Councilmember Veach asked a lot or said a lot of things that I was going to say, so I won't rehash it, but I just wanted to let people know my interpretation of what the board is.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you for being here. So I'm a little confused because I think I'm getting a mixed message. So are you saying that you think it could be helpful, or are you saying you're already doing things necessary to alleviate the concerns that a nuisance abatement board could assist with?
I think we are already doing those things, but the speedy result of it, as Councilman Veach said, would probably be helpful if a board specifically followed up on those 7 things or those crimes that we are giving to you. So depending on the way that the board is going to enact and contact these people and get them to change what's going on, that could be very helpful. But I'm just saying that as a sheriff's office, to take on that sole responsibility of serving people, scheduling hearings, doing such, I don't know that that's going to be any more helpful for you, and I don't know that we have the time or the resource to do that in any kind of an expedient manner.
So what you're saying, and I don't want to put words in your mouth, so you're saying that the nuisance abatement board could be helpful, but just depending on how we structure it.
Absolutely.
So you're not here saying that we don't need this because we're already doing all the functions of a nuisance abatement board. You're saying, hey, if you set this up appropriately, it could really be helpful to enhancing public safety for our island. Again, don't want to put words in your mouth, but I want to make sure I'm clear as to what you're saying today.
Yeah, and that's just my personal opinion, but the board's going to have to decide that, because I do feel that if we are communicating, and this board is a means of communicating with the board about what's going on and crimes that we're investigating, then you're more knowledgeable all around about what's going on. But I will tell you that the crime numbers are already going down. So really what you're trying to accomplish is going to be a question you guys got to answer for yourself. But to answer his question specifically, would it be more helpful for somebody to hear these cases and get back and try to follow up with the business owners from a city perspective to get things under control? My answer to that is yes, it would be.
Thank you. That's very helpful. And I had the privilege of meeting with your team. I don't think you were at the meeting, but we had 3 gentlemen there, 2 captains and a lieutenant. I think combined they had close to 100 years of experience. So a very impressive group of folks here that are helping with this effort. And challenge, of course, Captain, and I'll just and we know that there's legitimate attempts to change and to reform and to implement improvements, and I take all that, and I'm very appreciative of that. But these gentlemen, I don't want to put words in their mouth because everyone's real sensitive about this, including myself, but we've got locations on this island that have been problematic for years. And that's the concept behind the Nuisance Abatement Board. Reoccurring events at one location for the reasons that Councilor Veach discussed. And again, you guys are great proactively, enforcing the law and responding to events. But if that location has created a climate for whatever reason that precipitates this reoccurring activity, it seems as if this principle of the Nuisance Abatement Board, particularly if it's very restricted, which I think ours is, to serious crimes, it seems like it could be helpful. Am I missing something there?
Well, without actually examining the entire island and seeing what percentage of certain areas that you talk about and how we can get crime down on that, it's hard to discuss and give you an answer about whether it will be helpful or not. But if we're talking about a specific area, we can look at that specific area over a course of time, and we could determine what calls for service or what crimes are actually being committed or reported as a result of something happening at that location, not just specifically the address of that location, because there could be something happening in the middle of the street that's coded to that address, like a traffic stop, for example. So to actually analyze that and give you a good answer, we're going to have to know what we're looking at specifically, what's going on, what's the time frame, and then track what we've done and how that's affected the crime to either go up or go down.
And I guess, and ask this respectfully, because I know you guys are in a tough spot, but so, and it's, again, this is not about singling anybody out. It's about discussing whether the principle of a nuisance abatement board for Fort Myers Beach makes sense or not. We've had an address that for years, your team knows it's been a problem address, and it's taken a disproportionate amount of the town's, counties, the fire departments, public safety resources. Nothing's changed. I mean, nothing happened. So, I mean, it's been happening for years. The data shows this one location has had a disproportionate amount of issues. So something hasn't worked within the county sheriff's office or the fire department or the town. And it seems like structurally this might be something that could change what has been happening for years on this island. Is that fair or is that not fair?
Well, if you don't mind, what location are we talking about?
We're talking about 1400 Estero Boulevard. It's the Lonnie Kai. I mean,
Okay.
I'm trying to be respectful here, but I mean, but I'm not trying to go after them. I'm trying to go after this concept of, is this nuisance abatement board necessary? And the whole concept is you have one location or numerous locations on this island that have reoccurring activity that take and absorb a disproportionate amount of the public safety resources, diluting the ability for you all to help the rest of the island, to respond to the rest of the island. And it seems like then, therefore, the island is therefore subsidizing this one location because we're not doing anything about it. And it seems like that's happened for years. And until the nuisance abatement board conversation came along, it seemed like that's the first time we've had significant change in that potential behavior. So I guess it seems like that's the purpose here. And again, I'm not trying to single out one location, but why hadn't the sheriff's office for years triaged that, like you just discussed, and gone in there and required changes? Because it sounds like you don't have the sort of structural capability to do that. You can respond, but there's nothing within the sheriff's office that gives you the opportunity to go in there and say to that business, you know, you need to change X, Y, and Z, or these are the repercussions that are going to occur. It doesn't seem like you have that tool either. Is that fair?
No, I don't think it's fair, and I'm going to talk a little bit about what we've already done, because you had mentioned nothing's been done, so I want you all to know what's already been done, but I will defer the amount of resources that the agency takes for the calls to service at that location versus the rest of the island or the rest of the district to Captain Jakacki in a minute. But just to let you know, since the incident in question, or since any incidents in question, is the last 3 weeks, Community Policing Unit, CREW, which is a problem-solving unit, has met with the Lonnie Kai and the owners of the Lonnie Kai on 4 different occasions. And just last week was my last meeting with Ken, who's one of the owners there, and we went through a laundry list of things that they've taken, corrective measures, which are most are already in place, that they're doing to try to curb the amount of calls for service that are happening at that location. And if you don't mind, I'd like to share those with the board real quick. The first thing is they've implemented wristbands, and what that does is that anybody who is not a resident or a guest at that hotel and does not have a wristband will be challenged, both during hours and after hours. And if they're not one, they're going to be asked to leave, and if they don't leave on their own, we're going to be called and we're going to have them trespassed. Second thing is they have committed to hire 2 deputies on the busiest days of the week, which is Saturday and Sunday, and then another 2 deputies on a holiday. So just this weekend, we'll have 2 on Saturday, 2 on Sunday, and 2 on Monday at that location. And that's been going on for the last 3 weeks. They have instituted a resort fee of $9.95 per day. They have increased all bar beverages by 50 cents. They have taken all the suggestions that we have given them, the agency. I don't know if the board or anybody else has given them any suggestions, or the city, but they have included all those. They have increased the parking lot attendant to take a $10 fee from anybody who's visiting the hotel. What it used to be is you pay $10 to park, from what I understand, and then they give you $10 in vouchers, so you really didn't pay anything because you used it inside the facility. Now you don't get the voucher, so you got to pay $10 to be able to park your car and go in there and use it. They have established, and in my opinion, this is one of the most important things, a do not rent to list. So meaning, if they have an issue with any type of a guest or a visitor there, and it turns out to be someone who they have asked to leave or is not the type of person that's being good to their establishment, they put them on this list. And when everybody checks in or everybody wants to call and reserve a room, if they're on this list, they get denied by the ownership. They have hired an outside security consultant to come and train their security guards about what to look for, how to identify early warning signs of potential groups or problems, and how to address those people before it becomes an issue. And that training is extensive and ongoing, and that's all I have here. So all those things have been discussed. They seem to me to be positive changes. We also have to give them time to see how those work. They are like-minded at that facility. They want to improve things. They want people to want to come there. They don't want to be a sore thumb. So that's community policing. That's problem solving. And that's us following up with them on a regular basis. Say, hey, how's this going for you? Is that working? Okay, well, maybe we want to try this. Well, maybe we want to is there anything we can do to help you? Is there any type of survey that we can provide you with our certified crime practitioners that can tell you how to improve some lighting or maybe deter some activity by not having this blind spot over here or doing something like that? So to answer your question, we don't have a nuisance abatement board yet, but we've already enacted and discussed and done all these things with that specific location. So I think that that's positive. I think that that's working, and we can only give it time to see how it pans out.
And please don't misunderstand. I think that's excellent. And that's, by the way, that's the first we've heard of those specific reforms. It'd be great to have them come, and we'd welcome them to come and tell that story. And I'm very hopeful that you've got a lot of institutional knowledge on your team, and they could be a wealth of information to an institution like that. So I'm glad you're working with them. I guess the Lani Kai out of this for a second. Let's say we have another actor on the island with similar challenges. It was nice that the Lani Kai, unfortunately, took a horrible event to sort of bring all this to the forefront. What if we have a different institution on the island that's have a similar pattern of reoccurring activity? You know, how do you, where's the tool in the toolbox for the town to say, you know, you've got to implement the reforms that you've just talked about? And then where's the tool in the toolbox to hold them accountable to see if those become effective and been fully implemented? So take them out for a second, and just the principle of having this entity that can be there to address situations like the one we just discussed. I mean, it seems to make sense. I'm not trying to chastise anybody. I'm just trying to see whether that's a location that sort of started this conversation, but set that aside. Now the question is this the concept still just, even without the Lani Kai in the conversation, and we seem to be a little bit helpless in the town to be able to respond to habitual offenders on the island. I guess this seems like a tool that could be helpful down the road. Hopefully we never have to use it, but it's there if we need it.
And I would agree with that statement, and you're talking about not gaining compliance, not having a party on the other end of the conversation that's willing to work
That's
with
right.
you and implement change. And yes, I would have to agree that if you have somebody that's just going to draw a line in the sand and say, hey, this is my business, this is how I'm going to run it, and I don't want to hear from you, matter of fact, can you leave? Then yeah, you're going to need some type of a more stringent tool, because absent a call for service, absent the suspicion or of a crime, we really have no authority to go in there and just say, hey, you will discuss with me how to improve your business. Law enforcement doesn't overreach at that aspect, but from a town's standpoint, from a nuisance abatement standpoint, that may give you a little more teeth to hold somebody accountable if they are not complying and working with you to begin with.
Thank you.
Well, they're either breaking a code or they're breaking the law, one or the other, right? So we've got it covered. We've got it covered. I mean, you've got the law side of it, we've got the code side of it.
Absolutely, and what we do need to improve on is the communication between both.
Yeah. Okay. While I'm speaking here, I'm very undecided about this nuisance abatement board business, but I will say that, and that's not the first time I've heard about those changes. We've been emailed those or whatever, that list of changes. But since, regardless, if you hadn't got it, I don't know why you wouldn't have. But since Since then, I have met with the attorney that came here to speak with us, Ellen Bogdanoff from Becker Polikoff over on the East Coast, that's working with Bonnie Kai, and she's taking this, of course, from a risk management point of view, and you know, with things that have happened, I mean, they're being scrutinized now from a risk management point of view. So lots of changes are going to come about, you know, automatically. I mean, just culture itself was developed over years, and that's going to have that'll take probably a little more time. But a lot of these changes are happening now, and I heard Councilman Veach say earlier that you know, these other locations, we should share those, because I don't know, I haven't heard of these other locations around the island. You know, these other hotspots. But you know, if I knew that, if I thought that there were lots of other locations, then that maybe that would impress upon me a little bit more. But frankly, I don't, and I'm open to listening. And with that being said, thank you, Captain, for your information. I'm sorry, Vice Mayor, was there anything you wanted to ask of the captain?
I don't have any questions, and I mean this with no disrespect, and in fact respect. I've made my position pretty clear that I think we're going down the wrong road with this, and nothing that was said today convinced me to change my mind. It seems like they're already doing the work that we want to have done. If the circumstance should arise that we start having a property owner who's thumbing their nose at us, then yes, then we'll do a nuisance abatement board, but I haven't heard that that's happening yet. So, and I think it's quite a bureaucracy to create, and we don't necessarily have the problem yet. So
I think
I'm glad to hear of all the things you're doing, and I thank you for your work.
Thank you, ma'am.
the uproar and the demand for the nuisance abatement was brought about by this one particular property. We all know that. And that's being mitigated now as we speak. You know, the changes are being made, the proper things are happening now. And to the best of my knowledge, we don't have another property like that here on the island. So, you know, I think in the spirit of cooperation, they're moving along, they're moving ahead to implement these changes and so forth, and I think we should give them the benefit of the doubt at the moment and proceed with the way things are going. But, Councilman, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just one point that I think, and you know, it's about kind of finding the root cause to a problem. Because sometimes the problem is, you know, people who are doing the drugs. Other times they're afforded a location or an opportunity to be able to do the criminal activity, which is part of the thing we're talking about. And I think with the Lani Kai, I will congratulate them on what they're doing now. But it took, like Councilman Adderholt said, a horrific event to do that. Certainly before that, and then the smoke hasn't cleared to where there's change, they had an adversarial relationship with the authority of the town. And the examples that I've heard of things that are ongoing now, but they're all kind of hearsay, so I won't defame anybody by saying something that I don't have verification on. But I have heard from people who have bought two properties. One is the Sea Gypsy Inn and one is the Mango Street Inn. And when they bought them, they were in pretty bad shape. I've heard Dan Andre tell me that, you know, mysterious guys are going and digging in his fence after he bought the property because that was probably where they had their stash. And that went up some time. It took a sale of the property for that property to come into what I would call compliance with the norms. So those are kind of examples. I'm not completely sold on a nuisance abatement board. I see it as a useful tool. I think I want to clarify some of the mechanisms because, like I said before, where the example in Fort Lauderdale was not punitive. It was a way to get the people who are on the fence about doing a voluntary program to bring their property into compliance, do that program. Short of having a murder on their property or some catastrophic event. Now, I think that one of my biggest reservations about starting this and going through the work of it, well, two, is actually the mechanism of how the town and law enforcement work together to make this work to investigate properties. In Fort Lauderdale is much bigger town, much more of a higher population and criminal footprint. They had a dedicated detective who did that. And the other is that there's the chance that we could create this and essentially it would never be used. maybe it's enough of a deterrent having it there, but that if someone knows it's there, maybe they're more likely to talk with the sheriff voluntarily and get these problems resolved.
I have a friend here on the beach. He's a retired inspector from the New York City Police Department. And when this business came up, he said, let me tell you, we had that in New York City, and it worked very well. Of course, my response to him was, we ain't New York City, And so I understand how it can be a tool and everything else. But I also understand, I told you this anecdotal story. I told you this story once before about an incident where there was a drug house on the beach that I was made aware of on my last term here. And I called Captain Powell and explained to him what happened. And Matt sent somebody down there the next day and shut it down. And that was the end of it, And I suppose they're like rats, they can go set up somewhere else and stuff, but you just you keep after them, right? And that's law enforcement. That's what you do. And anyhow, if there's anything else to add to this,
If I may, Mr. Mayor, I think to put it very simply, right now the town doesn't have an avenue or a tool to make sure that repeat behavior doesn't resurface. And although things are being done and taken to make sure that things are getting cleaned up, by doing nothing, we are ensuring that the community has nothing to fall back on to say, listen, falling into old habits is not going to be tolerated. And I think this nuisance abatement board is that tool that allows the community and the town to have a say that things that maybe did happen in the past don't happen again in the future, whether it be one business or another business that may come down the line 5 years from now, 10 years from now. So for me, I think it's an important thing to have so that the town does have some ability and some say in how the Lee County Sheriff's Office can work with our town to make sure that resources aren't being devoted to a repeat offender of things that may or may not come back. Now, there's nothing we can do. We have to rely on Lee County Sheriff's Office to do what they do over and over and over and over again. This, in my opinion, is a board that could potentially not have to require them to continue to do things over and over and over again.
Okay.
I just have a
Yes.
procedural question, Mr. Mayor. We were, at the request of the Lani Kai, we did give them additional 30 days, which I supported. And we're going to have a discussion on second reading for the nuisance abatement board on the 21st of September. Is it the council's intention then to have the Lani Kai come in on the 10th to discuss some of the reforms that the captain mentioned? That I have heard some of those reforms before, but they were announced probably a week or two after the murder. I was told that there would be a systemic, in-depth review by a certified risk management. Now, they've hired a lawyer, which is great, and I'm glad they've talked to the sheriff's department because there's a wealth of information there, but I assume they're going to have the results of some of these, talked about hiring and getting outside. But my point is, will we invite them on the 10th maybe to hear as to what the additional recommendations might be made and sort of an update as to what's going on before we debate it on the 21st?
we could certainly do that. I believe the attorney, Ellen Bogdanoff, also qualified herself as a risk manager.
I take issue with that because I went on the website and I checked her bio. I don't want to disparage her at all because she's obviously a talented attorney. She is not a risk manager, and she has some experience in the insurance industry, which was unclear. And they said that they were going to hire a risk manager. I know a little bit about risk management. I used to be the state insurance commissioner. I've not seen it yet, and I'm hopeful. And that's why I'd love to see the Lani Kai come before us and give us maybe a little bit more in-depth analysis of who they've contracted with, who they've talked with, and what the various recommendations are. Because to come up with these recommendations a week or two after the murder, that was great. But I have to think there's more in-depth systemic look that they've done, or analysis that they've done, that I'd love to hear about, because it might impact my view on the nuisance abatement board as well. But again, the nuisance abatement board to me is more than the Lani Kai. It's about giving the town some power over its own direction, its own public safety dynamic that we currently don't have, and it's been illustrated by the fact that this has gone on for years, and the sheriff's department, the town, the fire department have been powerless to make any structural changes in that behavior up until recently, which has been great. So anyway, so I think it'd be great to have the Lonnie Kai come and have, instead of hearing from the sheriff's office, let's hear from them as to what they're doing and what their long-term plan of attack is.
I guess the manager can look into that.
The council's request for them to come and give the council an update on what operational modifications they're considering has been already been extended.
Wonderful. And it would probably be helpful to have it be the 10th, Roger, as opposed to the day we actually debate the NAB, if
I
that's
gave
possible.
them a multitude of dates for them to, all the upcoming dates leading up to the 21st for them to come, so.
Okay, but ideally, it'd be better to do it
I'll
before.
reiterate the 10th. would be the
Okay, great,
date.
thank you.
Okay, Captain Prisco, I appreciate you coming in this morning and speaking with us about this, and we'll be speaking some more, I'm sure. Well, thank you again, and
Thank you, Captain. Thank you all.
we'll talk to you again. And Captain Jakacki's going to come up. I think the only captain not here this morning is Captain Morgan, but I'm sure he's down the street.
Morning. On behalf of the sheriff, we appreciate you having us here this morning. Many of you know I took over West District a few months ago. I started here, and I'm humbled to be back and working with all of you. But why we're here today is there's been interest in having enhanced police services down here on the beat. Captain Lee's going to talk a little bit more in depth about that, but I wanted to touch on a few things and make it very clear that the core service that you're receiving down here is excellent. We'll get into that in just a minute, but go on to answer your question about the Lonnie Kai, and I'm not here to isolate or single any businesses out, but you asked for some numbers with Captain Prisco. To date, we've had 17,993 calls on the island so far. And that's anything from self-initiated to calls from the citizens that live on the beach. 466 of those calls have come 1400 Estero Boulevard address. It's about 2.59% of the call volume down here on the island. But when we backed out some of the numbers, we average about 1.25 calls a day to Lonnie Kai. Does answer you guys' question with regard to the Lonnie Kai numbers. But anyway,
Captain, if I may, just while you're on that subject, because you had sent me a note saying that 466 calls for service to the Lonnie Kai.
right.
Only 161 were actual calls for service at the Lonnie Kai. Those calls included, but were not limited to battery disturbances, thefts, suspicious persons or vehicles, sexual battery, trespass, etc. You said 161 of those were actual calls for service. What were the other, out of the 466, how did you classify those?
Well, out of the ones that I backed out of there, we had 175 area checks. That's where the deputies will go up to the property, ensure that everything's going well there. We had 29 medical assistant calls that we responded to assist the fire department. Without going into each and every one of these to find out the details, and I pulled up a few of them, but we had 43 public assistance calls. Some of them had to do with dealing with a homeless person sitting down there. They don't categorize that as a high priority call as the other ones we mentioned. Get some 911 hang-up calls, but the problem with those are, it could be on the beach, it could be on Estero Boulevard, but it zeroes in on 1400 Estero Boulevard sometimes, and frankly, more often than not, it was accidental by pocket dial or something to that.
Just wanted to ask, because in the paper, in the Observer, there was an article about, there was a woman from the Lonnie Kai said, listen, 1,000 of those calls were just people stopping by. And I think that you call those area checks. This was over the last 2 years, and then obviously we've had 175 area checks up to this year. Just to make sure that people understand, those area checks aren't just because you're just stopping by to have a cup of coffee and say good morning. You do an area check in areas that are problematic. In other words, Diamond Head doesn't have 175. you go to areas that have, where there are challenges, so you can't just write those calls off, right? I mean, you have to, they're area checks because they're in areas where there's a concern. Is that fair?
That's fair.
Okay.
Anyway, so that's where we came up with those numbers. And the area checks are there in hopes that we're deterring the crime. Just our mere.
No, I
presence.
welcome the area
So,
checks. I didn't want people to discount those area checks. Yep.
Absolutely.
Yep.
Anyway, the island's divided by two zones. We have the Zone 4, which is everything from Denora north, and then the other end of the island would be the south end. Obviously, most of our activity is on the Times Square area of the island. That's where most of the bars and other restaurants and stuff are. But going to some of the crime, since coming on board and taking over the everyday operation of the sheriff's office, Sheriff Marcino has taken serious steps to decrease the crime all over Lee County. Some of the stats that I can share with you from Fort Myers Beach, our crimes are broken down by two categories. There's Part 1 and Part 2 crimes. Part 1 crimes are the crimes that we're most concerned about, your homicide, manslaughter, sex crimes, robbery, aggravated crimes. And Part 2 crimes are your simple assaults and stalking type cases. To date, our Part 1 crimes on the beach in the Zone 4 area is down 24%. That's excellent. And then on our north, the other end of the island is down 26%. So your core service down here is excellent. Our arrest rate is up 57% in Zone 4 and 100% in Zone 5. A lot of our crimes are being our burglaries and our assaults and our batteries and all those things. We're investigating and arresting people, which is showing that reduction in crime. So why we're here, everybody wants enhanced policing. We get about, on average, 10,000 calls for service here, and that doesn't include any of the proactive stuff that the deputies try to do in between. Some of the concerns that I've heard from many of you are specifically dealing with the e-bikes on the sidewalks and various other things. That's where the enhanced policing would come in, and that's where Captain Lee will pound a little bit more on that. So, in regards to the numbers, is there any question about the excellent core service that the Sheriff's Office is providing to you down here?
Did you say, Captain, that some of the downturn in the crime rate might be attributed to COVID? People aren't out.
Yeah, some of those numbers could be from, but the arrests are up, so all the crimes that we are investigating, a portion, 57% of them we're making an arrest on, which is also
Right.
having an impact
But
on that reduction.
the first set of statistics, though, you were saying that crime was down,
Right.
and I'm thinking that we shouldn't
Well,
take a deep
I'm
breath,
sorry.
because that could go back up when,
Let me back up just a minute. Those numbers are from 18 to 19. 20 isn't out yet, and 20 is going to be skewed because of COVID. So, and I will get back to you after those numbers come out and give you a little more clear understanding if COVID did have an impact on it, which I'm sure it did.
when did you take over?
About 5 months ago.
5 months. See, I was assuming that you were giving us stats from your,
No. Just since the sheriff took over, and I will say though that a lot of people didn't know this. Sheriff it's emphasized it, and it's a big priority for me as well. I keep the same core deputies down here all the time on the beach, so you don't see many different faces coming in unless they call in sick or have a vacation. And I have to back plug somebody in there, but the deputies that are down here every day.
That's a long tradition here on the beach, really.
It is, and that's important to me and to the sheriff, so make that a priority, and it'd be.
I mean, going back to your own tenure as a sergeant and Captain Powell here, and prior to them, Sergeant Vaughn and prior to him, this one, I mean, it's gone on for years.
Absolutely.
We're, for the most part, the guys that are here, we know who they are. you know. Okay, I have a question, Brian, while you're there. Those stats that you're given, that's just for the island, just Estero Island, correct?
Yes.
It's not over the bridge or anywhere else, it's just
Just for the
here?
beach.
Okay, good.
Quick question, Captain. Is there gang activity on Fort Myers Beach?
I haven't been made aware of any.
Not seen any tagging or any graffiti or anything that
We
gives?
had some, but I think a lot of that, if I'm not mistaken, were from people just passing through. I haven't been made aware of any specific individual on the beach personally tagging stuff like that. Since stopped as well.
What would be the signs of that, excuse me, Jim, just to follow up? If there was activity down here, what would it be besides the tagging and everything else? I mean, what would they be doing?
That's the start of it, is the
Yeah, then what? Are they drug
congregating.
deal?
Probably, yeah, you'd probably have a house that people are starting to complain about where they're gathering, and that's when we'd look into it.
Really
None
haven't-
of that's come to our attention, at least not since I've been here, so.
Sorry, Jim.
It's okay, just to follow up in a very generic way, I'm going to ask you, is there a crime problem on Fort Myers Beach?
I think Fort Myers Beach has similar crime to everywhere else in the county. I don't believe that
It's challenging, Captain, and we spent an hour and a half over coffee, and you guys were great, and I appreciate all that. But it's one of the challenges, I'm relatively new to the island, is that information for the town, since we don't have our own police force, is difficult to gather. We now have one paper for the island, and they did a story this week about crime on the island, and it's everybody's speculation, everybody's conjecture. Is there a way through your PIO in the sheriff's office where you could, this data that you're sharing, and which is very helpful, is there a way that we could be informed as a council more regularly as to what's the criminal activity that is occurring on the island, especially big events, and when you aggregate data, that could be shared with us as town councilors, because we're asked all the time, we're supposed to make policy decisions, we're going to make one today, or maybe this next couple of months over community policing. But we're sort of working blind here, aside from, again, the conversations you and I've had, but it'd be nice for the public to have a sense as to what are the challenges from a criminal standpoint. And so we have that data, so the public has that data. So if we decide to get additional community policing, then the public can say, hey, they made a smart decision based upon the data that was made public. And it seems like it's difficult, that data doesn't seem to be in the public domain, and I wonder if we could do a better job.
You asked, and I'll start providing that to you.
Through the town manager, and the
be
town
that
manager that
difficult.
could share it with us, because
Absolutely. I get it to Roger, and he can share it.
when the murder occurred on the Lani Kai, all the reports I was getting was from Wink News. I didn't hear, we feel a little bit, I think we'd be better policymakers too if we had that information as well.
Absolutely. Like I mentioned when I spoke to all you, I'm a phone call or an email away, so if you ever have questions, ask, and I'll get you those numbers monthly.
I think it's helpful for the public to know too, because we have people all over the island if you live on the south end, you might have a different feeling than people who live on the north end. Depending on your personal experience,
Right.
there's a wide disparity of people's perception of what crime is on the island and how bad it is, and it might be best to have those opinions data driven.
I'll get you that each month.
I think we're all guilty of it, but all we know is what we know. Yeah.
No problem at all.
Okay.
Captain Jakacki, thanks for meeting with me several times, and all your staff at Lee County Sheriff's Office. You guys have put countless hours in with me on the phone and emails, and I appreciate that. Does the Lee County Sheriff's Office have an average of what, say, one particular deputy sees in a year as far as calls that they respond to? Is there a formula that you calculate on average, an average deputy sees this many calls a year?
Are we able to pull those type of numbers? I'm quite sure we are, and I don't know. I'll get you that answer, but I don't know how easy it would be. If I have that now, no, I don't.
Appreciate it. Thank you.
Mr. Mayor, can I just go back to Councilor Adol's point? I just want to also, since we're talking about getting information, the Public Safety Committee has also requested that both the Fire Rescue District and the Sheriff's Office provide them on a recurring basis with information about their aspect of public safety and the demands and response and so on and so forth. So I just want you to know that if you aren't aware of it, that your Public Safety Committee is also looking at receiving similar information and analyzing that on your behalf.
Thank you.
Captain, before you take off and get comfortable there, just a couple of things. Now, you mentioned about the community policing, and you specifically mentioned like e-bikes on the sidewalks and the beach. Have you written tickets for anybody riding an e-bike? Yeah, or has the sheriff's office written any tickets for people riding e-bikes on the beach or on the sidewalk?
I can't give you that.
I want to apologize again because I'm probably going to ask you another question that I know you probably won't know the answer to since you've been here 5 months. I've heard some residents tell me about that, once upon a time that we had a substation on the island, that we had community policing, like 3 community policing officers. I don't really know the timeline. I think it was before incorporation. But in the document we have with you currently, the document says you maintain the current level of service at the time that document was signed. Do you know what the level of service was at that time? Was it like it was now, or was there community policing?
Well, I think that document was signed, December of 95?
2001, I
How far?
think February 2001.
Or 2001?
97, I believe it was.
The ordinance is
Yeah, I don't know
signature
what
pages.
I don't know what the numbers were down. I know when I started, there were the 2 ones and the 2 deputies. And that was in 96. I don't know when that particular document was signed, how many deputies were assigned down here
That would be
on the island.
post-incorporation.
Yeah, I figured there would be a stretch, but thanks for putting up with me.
All right.
Okay, thank you, Brian, Captain Chikaki. Okay, Captain,
I'm sorry, I'd like to just address your question about the PIO. I also have the PIO under my supervision, and that is what you're getting with the Community Outreach Center. These 2 women right here that we put there, Kira Everly ran the other 2 outreach centers we have in the county, and now she's permanently assigned here on the beach. And Tiffany Wood is one of our best PIO, public information officers, that we took here and dedicated to the beach as well. So any communication or any stats or any numbers that you want, these 2 women right here will be more than happy to gather those for you, and we'll provide whatever we have.
while the ladies are here today, you might stop in and say hello to our PIO, and our PIO can talk to your PIO, and we can PIO together right down the lane.
Because it would be nice to set up a system where
Yeah,
we are regularly shared, so we don't have to ask each quarter, just all of a sudden each quarter, or if there's an outstanding event, like a murder, whatever information you can provide, we don't want to get in your, and mess up your, process, but whatever information you could share that with us, and that'd would really be helpful.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Captain. Good morning, Captain Lee. This is Captain Blake Lee from the South District. Captain, if I'm not mistaken, you've spoken with each one of us individually about the community policing
Yes, sir, that's
program. So I'm going to ask you to keep your presentation, bearing that in mind, to the bare bones minimum, because we have a pretty full schedule.
Absolutely, and we'll go ahead and do that. So Mayor, Vice Mayor, Town Council, and Town Staff, good morning. As the Mayor said, my name is Captain Blake Lee. I'm with the Lee County Sheriff's Office, specifically the South District. That's a geographic subdivision of the Lee County Sheriff's Office, which encompasses everything south from 6 Mile Cypress on to Collier County, and then again east from Collier County out to the Gulf. My area of responsibility encompasses 2 municipalities. One of the ones which we're going to be addressing today is that of the city of Bonita Springs, where back in 2002, they decided that they wanted to go ahead and begin an enhanced policing program, or a community policing program, and we'll use that term interchangeably at this point. But back in 2002, we started the program, and it was specifically to go ahead and target the quality of life issues and crime that we had at the time. That program has grown substantially since then, and we're actually currently at 16 deputies with this current program. Crime has dropped significantly in the city of Bonita Springs, and of course is making it, the wonderful place that it is. So the purpose of me being here today, and I will keep it brief, and I'll just stick to my notes, because if not, I'm very passionate about community policing, so we'll make this a lot longer than you'd like. But either way, community policing, as I'd mentioned, has been adopted by the city of Bonita Springs. It's actually been in effect for over 18 years, and it's significantly impacted the quality of life issues within the city itself. Now, what is community policing or enhanced policing? And allow me, and I want to make this clear, and so everybody understands this and there's no confusion. It's important to note that this is in addition to the core level service already provided by the Lee County Sheriff's Office. This program will not take away from the current level of patrol services which Fort Myers Beach already received. This will be an enhancement. So community policing brings police and citizens together to prevent crime and solve community problems. With community policing, the emphasis is on stopping crime before it happens and not responding to calls for service after the fact. Goal is to work with the community as partners to reduce crime. And that's very important, is to have that partnership, to be able to interact with the community. And again, our deputies are out there, and you've got the 2 deputies that you currently have. But they don't have the opportunity to go ahead and be in contact with people. People also, other than calling 911, don't have the ability to go ahead and interact with them one-on-one and provide them with otherwise, information that may be beneficial. And community policing pretty much provides citizens with more control over the quality of life in their community by working hand in hand with law enforcement and allowing them to become an integral member of the community. Proactive policing strategies are never a one-size-fits-all. The strategy needs to fit the need and the circumstance. Now, we've had this conversation, and I'll briefly touch on it. Well, we have patrol deputies, and yes, we do have 2 patrol deputies on Fort Myers Beach. What is a patrol deputy? Patrol deputies are pretty much proactive and reactive in nature. If they're pursuing proactive activity, a call for service is received, one of about 9,000 calls for service, they're actually non-self-initiated, which means an alarm, a vehicle crash, and assistance to domestic violence. Okay, these deputies will respond to about 9,000 of these calls every year for service, and they're redirected from what they were doing. Community policing deputies, on the other hand, are tasked with different disciplines and have the ability to remain proactive throughout their entire shift, and they're able to focus time and attention needed to address specific community-related issues and quality of life concerns. They can dedicate more time, and an example would be traffic concerns, electric bikes that we've spoken about, beach patrols, business and residential conflicts, etc. And they also have the ability to go to work closely with neighbors and businesses to resolve ongoing issues. This sort of ties in a little bit with about what you all were talking about a little bit earlier today. I would like to address as well the perspective of the current manpower on Fort Myers Beach. There is a misperception that there are only 2 deputies on Fort Myers Beach, and we'll just touch on that briefly. There are 2 zones. They're covered 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, 365 days out of the year. And you factor the needed manpower to go ahead and cover those zones, include vacation, sick time, mandatory and professional development training, FMLA, etc. An allocation of 10.6 deputies is needed to cover the zones. Talking about 10.6 deputies is what's needed to go ahead and cover 2 zones that you have in Fort Myers Beach. And that's important to remember.
Captain, just real quick, I know
Yes.
we're short on time, but when you say that Fort Myers Beach is zones, and we have 2 officers per shift assigned, those 2 officers are in essence covering 2 zones. It's really 1 zone, but it's just for your purposes, you divided it into 2 zones?
Correct. Yes, sir. So in essence, for our purposes, it is 2 zones, and that's how calls for service are dispatched, utilizing that sort of a grid that we utilize. However, yes, we have 2 deputies on the island per shift.
Okay.
And that's where that number would come out.
A typical shift.
Yes, sir, exactly. Now, this does not include other support services that the agency provides, such as detectives, your community response unit, traffic units, etc. And not to mention the new outreach center that the sheriff is currently building here on the island. Additionally, you have the SROs, which we've talked about in spring break. There's a significant investment that's made by the sheriff's office during spring break, and that's, of course, to continue keeping the island safe, and that comes at a cost of almost $250,000. So there is a significant investment that is made on a recurring basis by the sheriff. But either way, to go ahead and just in closing, Town Council had inquired in regards to exploring enhanced policing, and we're submitting on the behest of Town Council consideration for a pilot program of 2 community policing deputies, enhance policing to address community-related quality issues on the island. Cost and funding of this enhanced benefit is of $107,000 per year. This program has been very effective elsewhere in Lee County, and of course is now at your disposal. And again, this is going to be another tool that you potentially would have in your toolbox that you would be able to address some of the other concerns that have come up earlier today.
Excuse me, Captain, you just said $107,000 for the pilot program. Is that per deputy?
Per deputy, yes, sir. For the
I
yes.
didn't know if you had said that or not. I wanted to make that clear.
I thought I did, but if I misspoke, I apologize.
And that includes everything, including all the equipment they need, bars, guns, handcuffs, whatever.
Yes, sir. That is correct.
Questions for the captain?
Briefly, this proposal, two things. Number one, it would be in addition to what currently is assigned to the island, correct?
That is correct, yes, sir.
How would it incorporate this new outreach center? How would these community policing entities, 2 officers, be incorporated with this outreach center? How would it all sync together?
Again, to be effective in with our community policing, it comes down to communication. It's being able, if you have, and we've touched on this, and I was trying to make it brief, per the mayor's request, but, if you have a residential issue, if you have a business issue, where one business is having conflict with another business, be it a noise issue, or a light issue, issues that we have on the beach, et cetera. It all comes down to communication and working hand in hand. And as we all know, communication is effective for a good relationship. With the outreach, the center that we're going to have here, people are going to have a place where they can go if they wish to, not make a phone call. And they can actually meet with deputies. Our deputies are not going to be there. The deputies are going to be out on the island and working, throughout their shift. But what it's going to do is it's going to ideally increase the communication between the community, between, businesses, and the sheriff's office.
And our base patrol as well.
I'm sorry?
Our base patrol,
And again, see, what's wonderful about the community policing is that when we're able to identify certain issues that may otherwise not be brought to our core-level service deputies, our patrol deputies, then we're able to go ahead and we have a force multiplier. And not only that, you have a beautiful island. It's a vacation destination. And it's a place a lot of people call home, and having that additional presence on the island is definitely a benefit.
you said the pilot program. Could you give a little more explanation of what exactly the pilot program in detail?
In referring to as a pilot program, pretty much it's something that you as, town council would not be on the hook, long-term for it. This is something that, you all could try for a determined period of time, and then go ahead and evaluate the results of the program. If it's satisfactory, which I can tell you, if it's anything, like what we've already done, you're going to be very happy with the results. But it's not a long-term commitment, from the city council or town council. It's something you'd be able to.
What you just read from, can town staff get a copy of that?
I can send you a copy, yes.
I would like to, could potentially, Roger, maybe get it out on the PIO, put it out there for the public to be able to read. Sometimes it's hard for the public to hear the microphones what you're saying, so it might be nice for them to be able to read what you just read to us.
Yes, sir.
Other questions for the captain?
No.
Sir, Roger? Oh, I'm sorry.
I'll go last.
Vice Mayor.
This isn't a question for the captain, but it's a related issue. When he's all done, I'd like to bring something up.
Okay. Roger?
Captain, you mentioned what's deployed here in terms of for full coverage. Do you know how many sworn personnel there are?
Where?
Sheriff's office? Just
I
the
do
number
not
of-
know off the top of my head. Is there-
Any of the other captains know?
Well, not in the sworn. Sworn.
That's all right. I mean, you got a round number. You need an exact
What we have is
No,
we have.
just, I mean,
I don't wanna wait
I just
for
think,
them to research
it's
it.
great that 10.6 is a good number, but it's a good number reference to something else.
We have sworn personnel, and then we have civilian personnel in the agency, and then amongst the sworn personnel that we have 2 disciplines. One is going to be the law enforcement discipline, and the other is corrections. So I think the number that you would want to reference would be that of our law enforcement sworn personnel.
Also, since they're looking, Captain, so these community police They would be primarily proactive. Maybe get to the neighborhoods, the
Absolutely, yes, sir.
businesses, neighborhoods. So is it stretched to say that community policing would work with a nuisance abatement board, since they would be ones who would know the neighborhoods and talk to the neighbors?
What it would be is that law enforcement or your community policing program would be able to work with your code enforcement officers and address these issues. And again, if there's issues that are coming up that are criminal related, that's something that the sheriff's office would address, then yes, they would be addressing these. And the idea is the timeliness, and pretty much the being effective in addressing an issue in a timely manner. And that's what we have found. As soon as something starts, if we have that communication, if we have that rapport with the community, it comes to our attention. We have deputies that are pretty much immediately going to be able to go ahead and address it. And as a result of that, it mitigates, this small issue from potentially growing into something larger.
Captain, could you explain in Bonita Springs how having an enhanced police presence has helped with dealing with, I know earlier you mentioned that the two dedicated deputies that we have here now may not always have the time to dedicate to things like homelessness or, e-bikes or some of the other things that may fall down further on the list of priority when it comes to burglaries or break-ins or, things of that nature. How has it helped Bonita Springs in allowing the extra police force to address some of those issues as far as maybe finding the homeless places to stay, trying to get them some help, or being able to be there more often than having to go and take care of other things to catch e-bikes riding down the street, or just to use those as an example? How has that benefited or helped Bonita Springs?
There's a whole litany of things that we could go through, but you mentioned homelessness. We partner with the Lee County Division of Human and Veteran Services. They have a homeless coalition. If we do have homeless people that are, in need of assistance, we're able to go ahead and work with them, find them a location where they potentially could go ahead and continue to reside. And also they have a very good program in place to go ahead and see, help them seek employment. Again, this is a benefit of being able to have the time to go ahead and focus on these issues and assist people that otherwise, could use that help. When it comes to, drug houses, we have the ability to go ahead and focus on these specific areas and provide them the attention that is, required to go ahead and, discourage their behavior. If we have traffic issues, again, we're able to go ahead and take the resources and immediately deploy them, go ahead and run a traffic operation. And if we have any community issues, any community disputes, any business issues, they're resolved, they're addressed in a timely manner and generally resolved in a timely manner as well. That answers your question.
It does, thanks.
All right. Let's, Captain Prisco, do you have that number or not?
I'm working on it.
Let's,
It's going to be roughly around 600. Bailiff.
you want to make your point, Roger, and we'll move on? No?
My
just a question?
is
Okay.
Relative to,
Vice Mayor.
I don't want to do this while they're still standing here, because it's not a question for them, but it's a related issue.
Okay.
If
All
they're
right.
done, I'm ready to speak.
That's fine. I want to thank you guys and ladies for coming out today, sharing your wealth of information to us. And you've given us a lot to chew on, and that's what we're going to do. We're going to chew on it.
Thank you all for your time.
Okay, appreciate it.
Good day.
Thank you, captains, ladies, lieutenant.
Thank you.
Give our best to the sheriff, Captain Layler, whoever else we missed. Okay, thank you very much.
The item that I wanted to bring up was, well, it's been bothering me for some time about some issues that have been coming before council. We have a policy manual that says if something's going to come before council, bring it up during your council member items generally. It takes another person on council to say, yes, I'd like to go into this further. And it's placed on the management and planning meeting. Then we decide whether we're moving forward to do something official. I just heard a representative from the sheriff's office say there was a request from town council about enhanced community policing. I never weighed in on this proposal. I don't believe as a council we did make a request. And I'd just like to remind my fellow council members that it's great if you're interested in something and you want to go out and get more information about it, but then there's a process you go through when you bring it back to us. I feel like this is all kind of percolating and happening out there, and I never weighed in on it. I don't feel that others on the council did, and I'm just saying this for your consideration. If anybody believes I'm wrong about this, I'd like to know, but
Madam Vice Mayor, I did bring it up at the end of, under one of the councilor member items about potentially having the Sheriff's Office come and make a presentation to us. I don't remember the specific meeting it was, but I did bring it up to the council at the end of one of those meetings.
well, I guess I feel like this went beyond. What's happening is we're now asking for something to be released to the PIO, a proposal out to the community, and we didn't really discuss it yet. And the same thing kind of happened with the community substation. It was announced as if town council had kind of requested this and didn't really go through with. And I'm not saying this to be critical, I'm just asking if everybody can be kind of cognizant of this.
Okay, point taken.
Thanks.
The next item is B, the ADA Transition Plan presentation. This is a presentation by Castellanos and Tremonte Architects for the ADA Self-Evaluation and Transition Plan Report. And I believe we have Mr. Castellanos here this morning.
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 Set up here. Good morning, Mr. Mayor, Ms. Vice Mayor, Councilman, and
Morning.
first, I want to, before I get started, I want to thank staff that took us around to every place, all the places that we needed to go to. In particular, Mr. Pitts, one of your employees here, great person. He took us everywhere we needed to go, and we had access to every facility. So, Mrs. Chelsea's help, we were able to.
Sir, could you please state your name?
Oh, I'm sorry. Art Castellanos, Castellanos Tremonte Architects, president. We're a local architectural firm. We grouped together with Tyndale Oliver out of Tampa to do this study. But I'll get started on the study here since we're under time constraints. The studies we just released it last week, so you probably haven't had much time to look it over. It's about 550 pages. It goes in depth into every facility that you have. You had a concern to do an analysis and assessment of every facility, so that's exactly what we did. It drills down into the weeds of specifics of what needs to be done at those facilities to make ADA accessibility to those facilities. Some are more important than others, some are priorities. I'll go into a little bit on that in the presentation, so let me get started here. There you go. So, the brief overview, it's an ADA standards and laws analysis of every facility in the town. The study has a purpose and objectives. We start with what's here, and we end with what possibilities, what can be done to make the facilities accessible. There's an assessment summary at the end, and there's also a funding cost analysis in that study. Gives you an idea of costs of what needs to be done. What's the ADA? The basic, everybody's familiar with the Accessibility Disability Act. There's no entity shall discriminate against an individual with a disability in connection with the provisions of the public services, and that's under the federal ADA Title II of the American Disabilities Act. A million Americans have one or more physical or mental disabilities. The ADA was designed to remove the barriers that segregated and isolated people with disabilities, and regardless of the type of funding received or used. A lot of the work that we do currently code requires an amount of ADA into that, to be budgeted into those facilities. If there's something that needs to be done, we're to get upgraded. So we're doing the public agency requirements. We must make reasonable modification to facilities and services or accommodations to afford full and equal enjoyment. Provide reasonable auxiliary aids and services to assure full and equal enjoyment. Remove architectural and communication barriers and establish an alternative service where readily achievable. Remove architectural, design all new construction to be readily accessible and usable and to protect the path of travel. Doing that since the ADA Act passed in the new facilities, we automatically implement current ADA. The purpose of the study was to improve the access, safety, security at town buildings, parks, public rights-of-ways, and to develop the ADA self-assessment transition plan for the town. It's used as a guideline. Study objectives, inventory conditions that obviously we took pictures, we visited all the facilities, identified and prioritized improvements to access, address accessibility, safety, security issues at those facilities, develop the phasing plan to implement improvements based on anticipated funding as by budgeting, and it's over the years. It's not something that has to be done immediately. There's priorities that are put into place. Basically, the report's broken out into the most common violations, parking. The parking spots that what we found were narrow. A lot of them were steep. There's a percentage of slope that's required. Signage is required. Tactile signage on doors and openings and accessible signage. Also, the incorrect placement of the signage. Those are easily addressable. Accessible routes, we analyzed the sidewalks that the town owns. There's a report on that, all the accessible sites, the accessible walkways. The sloping issues, there are a couple issues here in the town hall. Slope issues for ramps, changes in levels, large drainage grates, accessibility for wheelchair access. In the report, there's a scoring and prioritization, red, yellow, green, white colors for each facility. Red being the major, the high priority, and the medium is the yellow, the low is the green, and then the white is something that can be easily quickly updated and fixed. The existing conditions, accessibility, the safety, security was analyzed. Prioritization can be done through visitor usage, the age of the facility, the severity of the facility, the cost estimation of the improvements, and the location of the. Then the implementation is through the town council approval process and the budgeting process over time. We give you a guideline, and the town is the one that approves it, implements it, modifies it. We can work with you on that. Improvements and locations chosen may vary from the plan. If you have a certain facility that you needs to have that's going to be worked on, that can be addressed as well. Improvements will need to be reviewed and work with the work plan developed with the guidelines that we have in the report. There's a cost and funding implement there that we've added to it, cost estimate overall, and this is a broad estimate. Around 1.2 million costs are planning level estimates. The largest cost is the sidewalks that you see there, 600,000 in sidewalks, and as you improve those areas, you can allocate those funds for those. The each access points were the next ones, highest ones, and then the buildings themselves that the town owns are come in after that.
Is this built into the budget already, or is this a new surprise for us?
Counselor, when we, before we went out for the selection, part of the item in that discussion, we advised the council that not only would there be a cost to the study and report that you're receiving today, but there would be an ongoing cost to address the issues that get identified. Begin to address this list of issues, we have put money in the add-on list of the budget, included in the budget, to begin to address these issues. It is not $1.2 million. It begins with $50,000. Now, that being said, we have other monies devoted to other improvements at some of these town-owned assets that will address some of these issues coincidentally. But this will be an ongoing effort over the next 5 years at least to address all these issues. So we advise you that sort of bill would be coming. It's here, being presented to you today, and we have a funding plan to begin to address it, but it is not a 1 year, one and done type thing. So we'll be working on it. We think it's important for a variety of reasons. The most obvious being that we want it to be accessible and we want to be compliant with the law. And there are other ancillary benefits to the town to be compliant. So we have everything driving us to doing this, and we'll be allocating money to address it, as I said.
Thank you. And just to point too, I noticed like half of this money was for sidewalks. Is that for the area that hasn't been constructed on Estero mostly? That already being handled by this project?
I believe that the county owns parts of the right-of-way. This was just for the town itself, the ownership of the sidewalks in the town itself.
Wow, I'm shocked by that because we don't have that many sidewalks that are town-owned. Can you give me an example of someplace?
Specifically, we were given, now, and I wasn't part of the sidewalk study itself, but I think it was from the north, everything from the north, from Bowditch Park, south. And I can get you specifics on that, exactly where the, which of the sidewalk, it's in the report.
Those are all fairly new, Chelsea. Weren't they just done?
They were done over 10 years ago.
Identification, please.
Chelsea O'Reilly.
But the ADA hasn't changed in the past 10 years, has it?
Correct.
So the people who put them in didn't do them right?
I can't speak to my predecessors, but we have a plan, and this includes all of North Estero. This includes the downtown Old San Carlos Boulevard. You all know that we're working on that project for the downtown sidewalk. So, like Art said, this is a very round number, but the main point is just identifying these and then making a plan to repair any issues that come up. So, and a lot of it comes with settling and slope. And we have fixed some in the past, at least under my reign, at 3 years, quite a handful. And then there's ongoing projects all the time, FPL coming through, boring, new construction, et cetera. So majority of the sidewalks are North Estero.
And the last part is obviously creating a plan with the town to make sure that the facilities are upgraded and in your time. So, I mean, some of the stuff that you've done already. You've implemented. We've been working with Chelsea's for the last eight or nine months with the department. So she's her information as to what and how, and this is the this is the beginning, I would say, of where we start. The report's pretty lengthy. It goes into detail, specifics, it starts with a overview, executive overview, and then each facility and each issue is addressed in report specifically for each building. So you can open that report per building, go into it, and look at what's red, what's green, what issues are. Work.
Have there been any inspections by the federal people yet for these deficiencies, shall we say?
No, I don't. I don't.
Well, I'll tell you why I'm asking that question is, I'm sure you're familiar with that law firm over on the East Coast that sends those people over every year or every couple of years and so forth. For those of you that don't know, there's a very unscrupulous law firm over on the East Coast of Florida that puts a handicapped lady in a van every year or 2 years or whenever, and they just hit every place up and down Tamiami Trail, stopping, and they let the lady out, they wheel her around, and then they list the deficiencies this long, and the first correspondence you get from this law firm is a lawsuit, and that's how they operate. So I'm just hoping that we're not facing. I presume they're not going after the municipalities; they're just going after individual property owners.
Mr. Mayor, let me just react to that. I think one of the things that, and I'll let John perhaps weigh in as well, but one of the things in doing this plan was to show that we're proactively dealing with our issues. Mm-hmm. So the first thing was to identify them, and we're prioritize them, and we're funding things that need to be addressed, and we'll do that with the full commitment of the council and the staff to get those things done. And should someone raise an issue that, for whatever reason, wasn't included in the study, we'll address that as well.
Thank you. Any more questions for Mr. Castellanos?
I appreciate it.
Thank you very much for coming down today and presenting that to us. We appreciate it.
Thank you, Council.
Thank you for your good work. The next item is item C, which is the project update on the Boulevard, construction project update, which is our periodic update on Estero Boulevard reconstruction project. And today it's written. There's no one here to present it to us. It's been read. It's been presented in our packets. It's been read by us. Does anybody wish to comment, or should we just dispense with this and move on? Any comments? Staff? Roger?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, I just want to let you know, we've inquired to see if when the permanent paving would go down sort of in the area between Red Coconut and Publix, kind of that area that's been late for a while and just sort of pending the final. Yes. So we did inquire for this meeting. We didn't get an answer back yet. We did get a thing that would be at night, but they didn't really say what date they have it scheduled. Well, as soon as we have that, we'll share that with you.
Quick question, Roger. Next time you talk to these folks, would you inquire, as you know, on the south end, there's one side of the street that has no sidewalks, and just recently they blocked off the area that did have sidewalks just south of Fishtail Marina. So there was no sidewalk on either side. I assume they're going to replace the side or build the sidewalks where there are no sidewalks first, and then replace the existing sidewalks. Well, at least some people will be able to get up and down the street. Could you just inquire on that? Because this may have been a unique instance where they didn't do that, but I assume they're going to work on the sidewalks that don't exist first, put those in, and then do the other side. But I just wanted.
Here's what I can tell you, Councilor. They're working on sort of half the street, half the road at a time, and their priority in terms of which side of the street they work on first is designated by where they have to put the piping in. So it's really the route of the transmission line that's really dictating which side of the street is done first. But I believe to the greatest extent possible, they're trying to maintain some level of pedestrian movement. Can't always do that, but they're trying to do that, keep at least one side open.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
And I think just south of right in the Bay Beach area, there was a stormwater portion of that being done at the same time. So that, I think that further complicated the
Okay.
sidewalk issue.
I think that's what I was referring to, yep.
Okay. Any other questions about the boulevard? We'll move on. Okay, the next item is a discussion of short-term rental duration definition. Wants to lead this out. I see Jason come in.
Mr. Mayor,
Yes, sir,
I'll just lead in that council had raised the question of the wording, the current code as it pertains to duration of the weekly rentals and the monthly rentals. And the perceived disconnect was that you could stay in a monthly rental for less than a month, but only once per month if it was less than a month. And for a weekly rental, there was no less than a week provision as it's currently written. The second issue that has come up, and it may have been.
But only once a week. Less than a week, but only once a week. It's like the monthly, is that what you're saying?
No, that's not how it reads.
No,
That's the discussion.
yeah, that's the disconnect, okay.
Okay, and then the other discussion was trying to wrestle with this issue that we've had, that we know our definition of family is traditional, perhaps out of date, but the concern about if we modify it, A, what do we modify it to, and B, would that trigger a fundamental change in our ordinance, which possibly could affect our grandfathering? So those are the issues that I'm aware of with our current language, and there may be more that you have, but those are the ones that have been expressed by council members in the recent past.
Let's take one at a time. Okay, John, did you have something to add?
If I may add to
Yes.
that, I don't want to say the confusion or some of the comments that have been made regarding the definitions of, 1 week per month or 1 week minimum more than once in a district, frankly have come about in the context, at least from my experience, is through the code compliance process, where we have had multiple unit owners or short-term rental owners come to the special magistrate and state, at least to the magistrate at the hearing, no, I didn't understand that, or it's difficult to follow. And the staff response, because I assist obviously staff in prosecuting those cases, is no, we met or we had phone conversations or email communications with the agent on numerous occasions and explained to them, sometimes in excruciating detail, what this means and how it works. My perception, this issue is being driven by violators, not those who are in compliance or who we have a good relationship with. And in particular, if you may have watched the most recent code special magistrate hearing, we had a number of cases with that exact issue. And what is driving this to some degree is the short-term rental owners placing ads on Airbnb and VRBO where they show that even though they know they're in a zoning district that doesn't allow for less than 1 week, because that's the starting point, they're allowing rentals for a period of less than 1 week in an area where from day one the town has said you cannot have a rental for less than 1 week, and in a smaller subset of areas in the town, only one rental per month of no less than 1 week. So they're doubling up on the violation they're having. They're renting for less than 1 week and renting multiple times in that month. I've met with staff. We've discussed it. You all have voiced your concerns and questions, And I think that there is some, it's being overblown as a concern, as an issue, because the problem, frankly, is from an enforcement and an application standpoint, is very narrow and limited to the ones who we have consistent or repeat problems with, who we've gone out of our way to explain the language in the code, but yet they continue to violate the code, and we have to bring them before the special magistrate.
John, I can tell you why I think there's some misunderstanding. I seem to have some memory of the prior council before March having discussed this issue, and I have some memory, the same way Dan has some memory that I've forgotten, that we had said, hey, this is something we need to clarify. Let's not enforce this until we get it straightened out. When I mentioned that to Roger, he said that wasn't his memory exactly of it either. But I think they may have heard me make that statement, hey, let's not enforce this until we get it straightened out.
I frankly don't recall that. I do
Right.
know that both.
And I'm not finding fault here. I'm just trying to explain why there may be some disagreement about it. To me, if I have a weekly rental in my neighborhood and the people are staying less time, that's good for me. So I think we do need to straighten this out. If they want to rent for less than a week, so long as they're not renting the property again within the same week.
That's the problem, is that we are.
I know.
Those are the cases that are coming before the special magistrate, where they're renting for not only less than 1 week, but they're doubling up. So someone's
That I
there-
don't have a problem with enforcement on.
Because, all we're saying, from the staff's perspective, what we advise the short-term rental owners and their agents are, it has to be no less than a week. If the tenant themselves says, well, I'm only going to be there 4 days, that's up to them. And then turn around and double dip. Mm-hmm. And that's what's happening. And so that's where the enforcement action.
So everybody that's been charged or received a citation had rented more than once in 1 week.
Yes. Or if they were in an area that only allowed one rental per month, rented multiple times, even though it was for a complete week.
That's not what's being expressed to me, so
Ms. Bircher certainly can come, but that is my distinct recollection as the attorney assisting staff in presenting these cases, and there are many. They all fall within either one of those two situations. We're not taking action against someone who rented for a minimum of a week, but the tenant or the renter was there for less than that, where they didn't then double up or double dip.
How is staff determining who's staying there?
Through multiple means. One, it shows up on the calendar on Airbnb. The reservations show up in that someone has week 1, let's say September 1st through the 7th, or through the 3rd, and then someone else has September 4th through the 7th. And then staff then goes out and verifies it by visual observation. They see the person changing on, the occupant changing out on that particular date that matches up with the calendar.
Neighbors.
Well,
And the neighbors, they can take photos and provide them to staff.
Can I just interject at that point? Thank you. While there may or may not be confusion by the property managers and the property owners as to what our ordinance currently says, neighbors know it very well.
That's right.
And they're the ones who are, in most cases, bringing this duration issue to the town, that people within a week or people within a month. And, they're fairly adamant that that affects their perceived quality of life on their street. And they're the ones who are reporting it because I guess they feel that that rate of frequency of turnover affects their quality of life.
It's the very reason that the ordinance were put in place to begin with.
And I understand that. My point is I live next door to a short-term rental, and I have no way of knowing if it's family members that are there, if it's the owners that are there, if it's someone's being rented there. I have no way of knowing who's renting that. So by just going to Airbnb, if it shows that it's blocked off, but yet there's still somebody there, I'm trying to understand how, as the staff or as the town, we can draw the line is that they're actually renting it.
As the manager indicated, in some instances, and again, this past special magistrate hearing was very indicative because we had a number of those cases. Many of the neighbors came and testified and said, in one instance, a particular neighbor said, I went to the person who was renting, and she said, oh, we all just got off of a COVID-19 a residency shift at the University of Miami Medical School, and we came over here for 3 days to party and decompress. And then the next person came in and said, oh yeah, I rented and I'm here for the rest of the week. So we do have the neighbors who also come in and testify and provide us with the information to allow us to present to the special magistrate that there are rentals either more than one in a week or more than 1 week in a month, depending upon what category the property falls in.
So back to what the Madam Vice Chair mentioned, if it benefits someone that they're staying there less than a week, if we go back to what we're discussing, would changing that jeopardize our grandfathered status if we were to change the verbiage from 1 week to once within a week?
No, but again, it's a matter of perception. The complaints that we receive and the cases we bring forward are from in 99% of the I don't want to say 99. I would say probably at least 90 to 95% of the cases that come forward to the special magistrate are initiated by the neighbors who feel that anything less than a week is that they have a hotel operating next to them because we're changing out every day or every 2 days.
And what is it, maybe I haven't found it yet, but what is it that designates a week? Is it a Friday to Friday? Is it a Saturday to Saturday? Is it a...
We normally go by calendar week, like days.
Yeah, they typically check in on Saturdays, but just to try to answer your question, if we think you're renting less than weekly or to multiple people in a week or to multiple people in a month, we're in contact with you. You can say, here's copies of my lease agreements proving that it's one person for a month or one person for the week. Case closed, over. The ones who don't provide any type of evidence whatsoever to contradict what we find the propensity of all our evidence, what's on Airbnb, what the neighbors are saying, the fact that you have a car from Michigan and next week you have a car from Indiana, the next day you have a car from Indiana, and we assume that the evidence that we've gathered seems to indicate that that's going on. We put it in front of the magistrate. That person has the ability to appear and say, no, here's what was really happening. Yes, I did rent it to that person, but then that was my car from Indiana. I drove in. We don't necessarily know that, but, and so they present that, and the magistrate reconciled all those facts. And as John was saying, if you watch the meetings, still generally, if it's not clear facts, at least my observation of what she does, she says, well, now you know the rules. And if I see you here again, I'm going to treat it as a repeat violation. I just want you to be aware that it's not just, well, we say it is, therefore it's a violation. We have an opportunity to share their perspective with us as staff before it goes in front of the magistrate, as well as when it goes in front of the magistrate.
I've had, of the several short-term rental companies that have reached out and I have talked to, me, it appears that they don't have the issue with the 1 week. It's the ability to only advertise the 1 week. So if they someone chooses to stay for 3 days, they aren't allowed to do that.
Well, they can do that. The problem is that they're renting in the same week to two different people for 6 days.
Which again, with my conversations with the ones that I've talked to so far, that's what they're doing, and they're in violation. But the ones that appear to be following the rules seem to have an issue with the fact that they aren't allowed to advertise, whether it be Airbnb, VRBO, for 4 days based on the way the world is now. Not everybody's coming for 7 days. Not everybody, they may only want to come for 4 days, but the way that the code reads is they aren't allowed to advertise, you can stay for 4 days because it has to be a week. Now, I don't know if there's, and that's where I'm trying to get to, is there something, if that was to get changed, would that affect our grandfathered status?
No, it wouldn't, but there was a particular owner and a management company that had multiple properties that came before the special magistrate a week and a half ago. And they did, as the manager indicated, they gave their calendar, and ironically, one of the calendars for one of the properties validated what staff was saying, is that they'd have rented multiple times in 1 week in violation of the code. And their calendar showed that they were all weekly rentals, and therefore the special magistrate dismissed that case. So they do have the opportunity to either provide it to us before it ever gets to the special magistrate. In this case, we asked, well, why didn't you come to us first and provide us this information? And they said, well, we just decided we wanted to come before the special magistrate instead of talk to staff. That's obviously their prerogative. And that was one of the issues that was identified, where the ad said minimum stay 3 days, as opposed to minimum stay 7 days. And I think it's a matter of perspective and opinion that, from staff's perspective, it would be easier to, or staff believes that there would be less violations of that minimum stay requirement if all the ads said minimum stay 7 days. Now, whether or not the person who rents elects to stay for less than 7 days, that's their prerogative, and we're not saying that they can't do that. But the renters or the agents or the owners then can't rent again. And what, in fact, one of the renters outright said is that by saying less than the minimum stay less than 1 week, we get more people inquiring about renting our units.
John, could I just ask a question?
Yes, sir.
Technical question. Not how you're enforcing, but how the ordinance is technically written. If I advertise for 4 days, and I take a renter for 4 days, don't rent again during that 7-day period, am I in violation of the ordinance?
Yes, sir.
I got a question on that too, John, because I thought the minimum period was a week.
If it's not being rented again, then it's not that the minimum that's not being violated.
Not how you're enforcing it, but how the ordinance is actually written. Am I in violation if I advertise and rent for 4 days? Am I in violation of the ordinance? I can only rent that one time during that 7-day period.
I believe the answer to that, and not to get into dispute with the attorney, but I mean, if you turn to page 10 in your kit, read the center column under lodging, a reprint from the page in the Land Development Code. It says for the restricted zoning, rental of any permitted dwelling unit to a single family during a 1-month period with a minimum stay of 1 week. So that's 1 week. Not about that. You can't be minimum of 1 week. And you go to the next bar across, it's labeled limited. In the center column under lodging, is rental of any permitted dwelling to a single family for a period of 1 week or longer. So there's nothing there that I'm seeing that says less than a week.
I think
So,
too,
so your answer is, yes, you would be technically in violation of the ordinance. Is that, I'm just trying to understand.
I read the words as they are. I would interpret it that.
So you're saying yes.
I'm not an attorney, but I would interpret that to read that way.
Okay, I'm just asking. Because you can say you're enforcing it one way, but if everyone interprets that as being in violation, then a lot of folks aren't going to go there. And as the vice mayor just said, you know, if I'm very sensitive to having more than one entity per week, but if that entity's 3 days and it lies fallow for 4 days, that's not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just wondering if we need to, as Councilor Aller said, if we just need to tweak that a little bit, have one entity, no matter how long it is, just for that week period.
I know that I'm going back to what I would say the enforcement issue is. Enforcement is complaint driven. If no one else, someone rents, let's say they sign a lease for 7 days and they only stay there 5 days. They leave. No one else comes in either the remainder of those 2 weeks if they're in the 1 week minimum once a month, or 1 week minimum multiple weeks in a month. We're not getting complaints. So we're not reacting to and that may never, and to your point, we may never get to the point of saying, oh, well, they're technically, or they're in violation of the code because they rented or they stayed for less than a week. It never comes to our attention.
I appreciate that, but if they advertise it for 4 days or less than 7 days, but you can only utilize it once a week, I understand it makes it a little bit more complicated on the enforcement side. But right now, if I advertise for 4 days and that's what I get, I'm technically in violation.
I don't believe, and I'm not the staff person who initiates the code enforcement. So, you know, I can't answer this. Honestly, I can't answer it with 100% certainty. This is how it's done. But it's my understanding in my discussions with staff and how they interpret that unless there's multiple rentals in 1 week, it's not considered to be a violation. They're not responding to, even if it says a rental of on the ad, a rental. We're not citing people for having an Airbnb webpage that says minimum stay three days.
Problem is, John, you may not be here forever, and the staff may not be here forever. So, because statute reads differently to some of us, I think it looks like technically you could be in violation, that you could be charged, even though we're not currently doing it. Someday, all the people who are working here could be gone, and they could interpret it the way we're reading. I believe there are 4 of us right now who have said they're reading it to say technically it would be a violation, even though we're not enforcing it. So it would seem to me like it would be good to clarify it.
okay, I want to just interject here because I've been waiting for a while here, John, is that it is a week only. And, you know, if you say it's a problem of people who are essentially using these vacation rentals as hotels by doing shorter than a week-long stay, which, like the mayor said, originated all these ordinances. If you're saying it's okay to rent only once a week for a shorter period of time, you're also essentially saying it's okay to speed sometimes, not other times. Or it's okay to speed if you're not getting caught. If the rule is 7 days, it also speaks to intent. I agree with what John said. If you in good faith rent for a week and the people who are come stay for 4 days and leave, you're not going to go chase them and drag them back to your rental. But the intent is to rent for less than that time. And part of the reason why the week-long rental was put in, the minimum stay of a week, and the intent is that these are in residential neighborhoods. It was a compromise to allow people to take these vacation rentals, but not be fast turnaround hotels.
It's not a faster turnaround. You don't have any more turnaround when someone stays 4 days versus 7 days.
You do, but then you have the vacant time. So what I'm saying is like speeding some of the time and not all the time. It's still speeding.
That's not a good correlation. It's actually a benefit to me that the neighbor in the short-term rental is there fewer days. So
I think the point made, though, is the people who come and rent for a couple of days, like a weekend from Miami, are different than people who come and stay for a week. People come for a couple of days, is more like a hotel. Hotels, of course, are different because they are staffed and they're regulated a lot more. And if people are staying for 2 days, they're staying for 2 days at a hotel or 2 days at a vacation rental. It's different than coming and staying for a week.
I think that the issue that people are having is not necessarily who's coming, who's not coming, or how long they're staying. It's fear of being violated for advertising less than the week.
You're saying
I don't think anybody's arguing the fact, if you're renting more than once in a week, that you are in violation and you should be punished for that. I don't think anybody's arguing that. I think what they're arguing is that they don't want to be in violation if they choose to only rent it for 3 days or 4 days of the week that they're allowed to rent it. That, to me, it's in the discussions I've had with people, that is the argument that they're making, is that they don't want to have to be brought before the magistrate if they choose to rent 4 days, 5 days, 6 days versus the 7 days.
Even though that is against the code.
Who do that?
Well, right now, during COVID, not everybody's coming for a week. I'm going on vacation. I'm only going for a couple of days. I'm not going for an entire week. If I'm running a business, I'll take a little bit of money over no money. And I think that's the point that they're trying to make to the council and to staff. And I keep going back to, if that is the will of the council or the will of the community or the will of everybody that has to make the decision, will that jeopardize our grandfathered status? We have the discussion, or it gets changed.
Well, in my view, I don't want to change it at all, because I think this is in place for a reason. And I think that, if someone really wants to rent for half a week, they can charge half the amount, and then people leave, they leave. But if you're advertising for 3 days and the law says it's a week, then your intent is to break the law.
Could you just repeat that one more? Because you confused me there. You're okay with them renting half a week or regular?
No, if the intent was, it's a weekly rental. We're going back to the thing about how, maybe it was kind of a poor example, but is that if someone comes and they rent the place for a week and they leave in 5 days, there's really not much enforcement or anybody else can do. But they're paying for the week. So if someone paid less, if they want to get the place, if they want to get that, capture that market, they rent it for 7 days at a lower rate until it makes sense for people. But I know VRBO, you go through and you say, and I'm saying it's a way they could do it, not necessarily ethical, but you go into VRBO and you say, you want a 5-day rental. If it's a 7-day minimum, it won't come up on the search.
But you'd be okay with a 7-day rental at a discounted price and not have it, knowing that they wouldn't stay, nudge, nudge, wink, wink, 3 or 4 or 5 days?
No, I wouldn't characterize it that way.
I'm not trying to put words in your mouth. I'm just trying to understand that nuance. But that's where the confusion, I think, comes in. People are trying to comply, and then all of a sudden they become they violate the spirit of the ordinance. I just think there's a lot of confusion out there.
But if it's a minimum weekly rental, and they are advertising for a 3-4 day rental, then they're advertising something that is against the law.
Currently, that's what I was trying to get from our town attorney. Yep.
If I may, I understand the discussion and wording in the ordinance. We as staff, we understand that. I just asked Ms. Bircher, are we issuing citations to people based upon our review of, independent of a complaint, of us just going through Airbnb and seeing someone have an ad for rental of 3 days or less? Her response was, no, we are not. The enforcement of the short-term rental regulations, 99% of the time, are complaint-driven primarily by the neighbors. And then we verify, we use as inferential proof that they're intending to rent for less than a week, all the totality of the information, including in some instances, the ads that they have, because some of the ads do say, 7 days, minimum stay, but we're not citing someone, either a vacation rental owner or a manager, for simply having on their webpage stays for minimum stay 3 nights, as opposed to minimum stay seven nights, 6 nights, 7 days. So it's the issue is now, if you want to say, hey, let's just simply say minimum stay of 7 days, where it's going to come into play and where it's going to be an issue primarily is in the category where it's 1 week, only once a month. You're still going to have situations where you also have potential for 4 rentals, minimum 7 days, in a monthly zone where they're renting for less than 7 days. They're doubling up. The problem that we have, and the enforcement, the action that's being taken, again, to use the phrase, is where people are double dipping within a week.
John,
Really-
I'm pleased to hear that, but I still think it's not clear the way it's written. And as the point that I made, you and Daphne may not be here forever, and we could have some future staff member who interprets this in a different way. To me, it's not clear.
So, Rex, you say we should let the way they're enforcing it dictate the ordinance?
So I think the way they're enforcing it is correct, and our ordinance should follow the path that we are taking.
So you should, the way of enforcement should dictate, should change the
No,
ordinance?
I think that we didn't write it correctly the way we intended that when we first did it, personally.
The ordinance itself should show the intent, right? So, I mean, I think that's what the vice mayor is saying. We just clean up the wording of the ordinance to make it, to really zero in on it, make it as plain as the nose on your face, and it would take a lot of the doubt out of it, right?
Understood. So we are absolutely clear if the majority of the council is telling staff to revise the ordinance to say that in a weekly rental zones, it is permissible to have less than a full week as long as there's not doubling up.
Correct.
That's it.
That's it.
That's it.
Correct.
That's it.
And you
That's
wouldn't
it
even have to
exactly.
change anything that's in there. You could just add it as a clarification for the town of Fort Myers Beach.
Go ahead, I'm sorry.
For the town of Fort Myers Beach, a week means that you can't rent it more than once during that weekly time period.
Than any 7-day.
7-day period.
So
However you want.
let's,
Yeah.
let's be clear, we're talking about, right now we're talking about the weekly, not the monthlies, right? So let's just be clear about that
Right.
bifurcation. So, because people are watching this and we don't want them to leave with the wrong idea. And we're making the distinction of once per week versus for a week.
Correct.
And
That
just,
would be, it would, instead of for a week, it would be once a week.
just to be clear on the record, I'm disagreeing with that. I think that the ordinance is written as it is, and just because they're enforcing it a certain way, we don't really do that good of a job enforcing dogs off leash. Doesn't mean dogs are not allowed off leash, or we should change the ordinance. Same thing with e-bikes on the beach. We made those ordinances for a reason, and I think we should stick with the ordinance. Plus, if we are going to screw with this, then we risk losing the grandfathering, and with the way
Said
it
3
is.
times that it doesn't.
Sorry?
He's been asked that question, and he said 3 times it doesn't risk the grandfathering.
Who's talking about writing an interpretation and not changing the ordinance? John?
The statute says that you can't adopt any regulation that restricts the ability of someone to have short-term rentals based upon zoning districts. We're not doing that. We're just simply clarifying the limitation or the minimum stay requirement. I do not believe that would jeopardize the grandfathering of this ordinance as it's just clarifying that that it's one rental once a week.
I also think, just to follow on, I thought if I may, just since the direction, at least that some of you seem to be going, is more liberal versus the more conservative, I would think that would, in terms of someone saying that we're fundamentally changing the ordinance, would help.
Correct. We're
being less restrictive.
I don't think, well,
yes and no.
that's in the eyes of the beholder as
Yes and
well.
no.
It's just, again, I view it as
How you look at
a
it.
clarification. That's how I would characterize it.
I don't think there's any way you can describe it as being anything than more liberal and less restrictive, because the ordinance says one thing, you're saying we're gonna give them options they didn't have before. The other thing too is
Well,
that
you have to go back to excuse me, Bill, what the vice mayor said earlier. I mean, if you're the person next door to that rental, and you've got some unruly people there, and they end up staying 2 days instead of 7 days, you got a good deal. I mean, you got a good deal there, you know?
I watched the magistrate hearing, and I watched one instance where someone did rent a property for 2 days, and it was a 2-day, 48-hour party. It was 2 days. It was someone for a celebration that came down. This is in the last magistrate hearing.
God, it only lasted 2 days. But I will tell you that, go ahead. Vice
I was
Mayor.
just going to say, and while we're at it, the definition of family has always been horrible, and we need to fix that at the same time.
I would also say, I've heard, probably like all of you, I've gotten emails from people who have multiple vacation rentals on the island who really want to have this. But I've also heard from a lot of people who are full-time residents who said their streets, if they're in a weekly rental area, are being eaten up more and more by vacation rentals. There's fewer and fewer people who are living there. This makes things like neighborhood watch programs and other things that help with criminal activity that we just discussed earlier. It makes it more difficult for them, makes the population more transient, and has more need for policing and other services.
So, I used to get on my knees every night and thank God that I was not on the council when this short-term rental was first brought up and discussed, because it went on and on and on. And I give them a lot of credit, those council members that were here at the time that saw that through, because it was difficult. And here it is, it's raising its ugly head again. And I think it's just, like you say, Bill, the island is evolving. There are changes happening all the time. So what that illustrates to us is that these ordinances, not just this one, but all of them, from time to time have to be looked at, updated, and brought into the present. I think that's probably what we're going through right now. So
I think, part of the question here, Mayor, is it going the way we want it to go, the way the community wants it to go?
Well, that's the thing. And, and a lot of times, sometimes that can be regulated by us, and sometimes it can't. And sometimes the market just drives it, and we have to kind of ride along with it and the best we can as a result of that. So,
Just for direction to John, does anybody else agree we need to change the definition of family?
I just was curious, John's opinion of our exposure with the existing definition. Do we have some potential challenges?
Well, as we're talking,
Answer is yes.
a resident has probably sent all of you all a text or an email referring to an attorney general opinion that talks about the issue of grandfathering. And it says, Section 509.0327B, the statute allows the city to regulate vacation rentals so long as such regulations do not prohibit them or limit the duration or frequency of rental. And it goes on to say, you ask the particular city, you ask, however, whether enactment of a less restrictive ordinance that would permit vacation rentals where they are now prohibited, allowing resort housing units and other zoning districts, would eliminate the grandfathered protection of remaining ordinances that deal with vacation rentals. In that case, the Attorney General opined, yes, it would. However, I think the distinction that we're talking about here is we're taking an existing regulation in an existing district and clarifying it. We're not opening the ordinance to include additional areas or durations that trigger the state statute preemption as explained by the Attorney General opinion. I will look into the matter further It's my preliminary opinion, as I have already stated, is I don't believe it jeopardizes the grandfathering provision, even under this Attorney General opinion. And I would also point out that, to your direction, this is going to go to the LPA, and it's going to come to you all twice for public hearings. It will be vetted, and during that time, we'll make sure that as we move forward, that you all can in fact do this without jeopardizing the integrity of the regulations as they currently exist.
Forgive me, John, that wasn't my question. Is the existing or the current definition of family, do you think that creates some exposure for the town?
No, the definition of family is in another section of the code, and the statute
You're misinterpreting his question. He's asking, should we change it? Is it
No,
not
that's
a
my
good
point,
definition?
Is the short-term rental makes reference to the definition in another section of the code, and that's the definition that we would be changing. There's not a definition in the short-term rental regulation for family. It says to a single family. And not in the table, but in the actual body of the ordinance, it says, as defined in section blank of the LDC. And this has already been discussed. The prior council, we brought forward as staff a proposal to make the definition based upon the occupancy load of the structure. And the previous council, after thinking about that through the course of at least one MMP meeting and a couple of council meetings, said, leave it the way it is. You obviously can relook at that, but that was staff's suggestion, including legal, that was a appropriate definition to substitute and wouldn't jeopardize the integrity of the short-term regulation.
Okay.
John, I think you're going off in a direction.
Well,
To me, the current definition of family is discriminatory, the way it's written, as it relates to short-term rentals. If you've got a bunch of gay guys who come here to have a vacation together, they don't fit in our definition of a family. And we're currently not enforcing that, is my understanding, again.
We're not enforcing that definition, and that's why the idea of a definition or is it related to the number of people who could occupy a short-term rental is based upon the occupancy load of the structure. Every building is rated for, so we don't have this issue. That was the alternative that staff suggested.
And I'm saying I think we need to do that.
I'm not disagreeing.
Okay.
I'm telling you that that prior council said no, they didn't like that as an alternative. If this council disagrees, we'll bring the item back. I remember having extensive discussions with the manager about it before it was brought before the prior council.
Well, I remember at the time that it was my opinion at the time that we needed to change it, and maybe I was in the minority at that point. I don't remember that. But I'm voicing it now to this council that I think we need to change it, and I'd like to hear. It seems that we often go out unclear as to the guidance because the attorney is or the manager is not understanding that a majority of us want to do X, Y,
Right,
Z.
that's what the point I was about to make, Madam Vice Mayor. If, right now, by our reference, the short-term rental occupancy is capped by our definition of family, whether you like that or not. We'll set that aside for a second. Question is, do you want to redefine occupancy? Or you want to continue that reference? That's really the issue at hand. Mary, the Vice Mayor, saying she doesn't like the definition of family and she would like to redefine occupancy. I don't know if any of you are also on the same.
wait a minute, Roger. It sounds like we're enforcing this ordinance based upon what John referenced was the desire of some on the previous council. not with the current way that the ordinance defines family today. So all we're saying is that the ordinance should reflect as to how we're actually enforcing.
Well, I think the fact of the matter, Counselor, is that, let's step back and understand, we don't have the right to demand IDs from anybody. We don't have the right to administer DNA tests to
But shouldn't
verify who's
the
related
ordinance
to whom.
reflect that reality, though, I guess is
So
all I'm
that's
trying
that
to say.
whole reality that we really can't tell, and we can't enforce whether
Should
five people a
should
unit
the
are
ordinance
family
therefore then
members under our
reflect that
definition or
reality?
not.
Right.
Well, I think clearly everyone in the room at this point should understand that our definition of family has sort of lagged behind current times. I think everyone would nod their head yes about that. And the problem really is that the council has not been able to reach a consensus on what the alternative is. So consequently, we fall back to what we have, which is this definition of family, which I think we would all say is somewhat lacking. So the question really becomes, does council want to dive into the issue and find a way to redefine occupancy that you're comfortable with? And if you are, then we can do that.
Well, that leads me to then the word family in general. Is it necessary to be in there?
Well, it's there as a backstop against unlimited occupancy.
Wouldn't it be based on the occupancy that is for that building?
Well, that was one of the things that was proffered when this was last discussed, and that didn't get traction by that particular moment. I mean, obviously, if it's 1,000 people, we know they're all not probably family members, but, as you get down to 7, it's hard to tell if they are family members under our definition. So the occupancy that was discussed at the time, just for those who may not be aware, was 2 approaches. One is let the fire department determine it, and the other alternative was to say X number of people per bedroom and perhaps whether sleeping on the couch or whatever. And that was the 2 thoughts that were debated without either one reaching a majority consensus. So we could resurrect that debate if that's council's desire, or we can continue the way we are.
It sounds as if, in fairness to the town, you're not enforcing the family provision anyways, right? So shouldn't the ordinance, shouldn't we?
I want to say that it's extremely hard for us to do that, and as a rule, we don't.
I'm not blaming you. I'm just saying the reality is you're not enforcing the family definition. So why shouldn't we have an ordinance that reflects the reality of today? That's all I'm.
Okay, I say let's change it.
I'm
Jim's saying
comfortable
let's change it. Do we have a third that says let's change it?
I'm
Thank you. We don't have to debate it to death today. We got to wait and see what he brings us.
I mean, I'm sure that's not an easy task, John, but at least we ought to take a crack at it.
But the occupancy is worthy of consideration.
I agree with the mayor on
mean,
that, yeah.
if the neighbors are really watching, which they do, believe me, they do, and they'll know. I mean, they'll know who arrives when. They'll know how many people go in the house originally when they all pile out. They'll know when another car drives up later on the day that those aren't the original people. And then they'll know at nighttime when they all go to bed, they'll know who's going in there too. So they will police it. And if they have an idea of what the occupancy level is on that house, we'll keep an eye on it. And that's who,
Once we make the change, we modify our registration documents to say max occupancy.
Exactly.
And then we now, when we get a complaint, we are able to pull up the record, see how many people are permitted to be or authorized, what the limit is. And
I think for us to try to define what a family is just
well, and it's
crazy.
the way that it theoretically is supposed to work. Theoretically, is that the unit owner or the management company is supposed to collect bed tax, just, and that should dictate, how many people are allowed in the, what's it permitted for from a tax and regulatory standpoint at DPBR, and we can
look with that.
I think too, to the mayor's point about the neighbors, Roger, there's been a number of folks who've queried the council about the the 800 number that you call if there's a problem at a particular rental property. It's going to an entity that either calls you back the next day or sends an email. There's not a human that, this is what I'm hearing. I'm just wondering if you could comment briefly on I love the concept. I love being able to have a number I call where I could reach the owner or the manager and get resolution if there's a disturbance there. There's been people that have said that that's not happening. Do you want to comment on that?
Yes, so we have a company that we utilize to help us deal with short-term rental enforcement as part of their scope of activities. They provide a 800 number, which basically covers when the town is closed, and officers are closed. There was one of the cases that was presented at the magistrates, one of the presidents, and I think they followed up with an email, expressed that they call that number, and the person they talked to was not overly helpful and attentive to their issue. And we've shared that comment with the company. We told them that we reiterated to them what our expectations are. Okay, that when they receive that call, their action is to notify the property manager or notify the police. That's their two actions.
In real time?
In real time.
Perfect.
Not to, we'll deal with this tomorrow. Perfect. Now, I'm not saying this as a defense. I'm just saying that they use multiple people to cover that phone. I'm sure that person covers multiple jurisdiction, and perhaps a person, got two jurisdictions confused because they have different operating instructions for each jurisdiction they represent. But that's all part of our conversation with them in terms of what our expectations are in terms of what we're paying for that service.
Thank you, that's very helpful.
Okay. I think you have your direction,
Sir,
Attorney.
thank you.
Well, thank you. Okay, the next item is E, which is special event LDC changes. This is to a discussion of the LDC section and changes to simplify and streamline existing process.
By way of introduction, Mr. Mayor.
Yes, sir.
This was an issue that was raised through our process, I believe, by the vice mayor, and there was consensus at that time through a prior MP for her to work with the staff to see if there were rooms for us for room for improvement. Our planning professionals work with the vice mayor to identify redundant language, language that was not unclear, and a variety of other issues to make it easier for public and not-for-profits to avail themselves of our special event process. Those are being shown to you in a blue line, I guess. I was going to say red line, but a blue line. Give you an opportunity to see if there's any violent objection with anything here. If not, we would then begin to bring this back as a revision to the code. Madam Vice Mayor, you may want to add some additional thoughts to that.
Yeah, just a couple things I would add. This came to me with the prior council based on complaints from different organizations in the town who were trying to do special events, who had been cited, other people who felt that it was confusing, et cetera, et cetera. I want to thank Sarah, who no longer is with us, Sarah Probst, and Patty Prevost, who is still with us, worked with me on this extensively, and it was great to work with them. Sarah was very knowledgeable about different towns and gave a lot of great suggestions, so she came at it from that perspective, and Patty came at it from the perspective that she's the one who has to process the application, so she knew where it bogged down there. When we dove into this, we found that, like our emergency statutes, we had 3 or 4 different definitions of special events, including a section called Special Events on the Beach, which had nothing to do with our special events statute. Unfortunately, when you look at this, it's a little confusing when you first look at it, because we don't start out with the section that we're actually defining what a special event is. The reason for that is I put them in chronological order. I put in the stuff that were everything we're taking out and modifying and consolidating back into the same section. So you see, we start out with location of construction on beaches. That's because this section had something about temporary uses in it. And again, that's another problem our code had. There was confusion between temporary use versus a special event. It was not clear about what was what, and people sometimes applied for applications for both. So just so that you understand, this is in chronological order based on number in the statute, and you don't actually get to where we redefine special events until much later on, packet page 44, it looks like. We drew a great deal of the language for defining special events from the city of Sanibel, but we also pulled in, I think we looked at almost a dozen different jurisdictions and pulled ideas from all of them. So there's a lot in here. I hope that I can answer questions if anybody has them, since Sarah's no longer with the town to.
If I may add, the Sarah, as well as obviously the vice mayor, forwarded the document to me, and there's nothing in there in the regulations. There's nothing legal significance. It's just a matter of if you decide, if you like what you see, we'll obviously put it in what, the traditional ordinance format, but it's still going to be a fair amount of fragmentation because, as the vice mayor has pointed out, it's regulations are strewn across multiple sections of our code, and the idea is that it is to consolidate them. So maybe, hopefully, when it gets to strike out and underline, it'll be easier to follow. But as a threshold, do you like those changes that staff and the vice mayor has worked on, and we'll then put it in the proper format for submission to the, I believe that because of some of the current regulations exist and they involve what's called the use of land, it would go to the LPA for review and recommendation before coming to the town council for first and second reading.
Part of the idea was that we didn't want people who were doing things that didn't disrupt or need town involvement to have to come and get a special event permit. So in other words, if you're having a book sale on the library property and they have adequate parking to deal with it and it doesn't cause a traffic jam or anything else that requires town intervention, it's clear that they don't have to get a special event permit. One thing that it does add that we haven't regulated before, and we had a lot of discussion about this, is we have not regulated garage and yard sales previously. But that went in under temporary use, not under special events. Most jurisdictions do regulate those under temporary use, and we had never done so. But I don't believe that we require a fee, if I remember correctly.
Well, right now, in way of fees, we're recommending that if it's a residential type of event and doesn't exceed 24 hours, there's no cost.
I just have one question about, at the beginning, you've got temporary use permit crossed out and special events permit put in.
What page are you on?
Page 38, section 6366.
Okay.
B. You've got, I'm just trying to get clarification. So if I want to have, using your example as a garage sale, yard sale, whatever, would I need if I'm having a temporary tent, would I need a special event permit as well as a?
This section is just about location of construction near beaches. If you go up to the top where it says section 63-66.
Okay.
So this is just if you're wanting to put a tent on the beach. It would be
So you would need a
special event permit.
and a temporary use permit if you're doing some sort of other activity.
No, we've crossed out temporary use.
So just for a couple quick clarification questions. First of all, thanks for taking on this thankless job. That's a lot of work. Second of all, so somebody mentioned garage sale won't require a fee, but do you have to get permission then from the town or notify the town before you have a yard sale? Is that correct?
You would have to get a temporary use permit. It's on page 40, bottom half of the page. A temporary use permit must be obtained for the following uses. And then garage or yard sales is number 4.
I've been involved in a lot of garage sales over the years and trying to find ad space, and of course now all the social media sites. Now I've got to contact the town of Fort Myers Beach and get their permission before I have a yard sale?
You don't have to get their permission, you just have to notify them, you know, that you're, I don't think we would turn down anybody unless they're doing more than 2 per year. There's no fee.
Why would one have to get the town's permission?
Well, I can tell you, A, it's regulated in almost every other jurisdiction we looked at as a temporary use. B, the reason that that has happened is that some people follow what they're doing garage sales, but they literally are selling things out of their garage on a weekly basis. They've set up a business in their garage.
This is to
And
help prevent that?
this is to help prevent that.
On the
Again, I don't have strong feelings about it one way or the other, and if everybody wants to say, hey, we haven't really had a problem, we'll leave it out, we put it in because almost every other jurisdiction does it this way. They regulate it as a temporary use, and the way that we were trying to make it less burdensome was to say, look, we're not going to charge you any fee for this.
Basically, you just download a form, fill it
Yeah.
out, and mail it back, drop it off, or email it back to us, and you're done. And again, if nothing else, no other reason, if we're going to say you could have a certain number every certain duration, we have to have a way to count that.
Right.
So, we thought by making it free, other than filling out a simple form that I'm doing this at my property at this address from this hours to this hours on this date, it's pretty simple and shouldn't be a detriment to people easily complying.
I see birthdays on there too, so if I'm having a birthday party, are there certain qualifiers before I have to call the town and get permission?
Only 1 per year.
Very good.
Pretty good, yeah, that's really.
Where do you see birthdays?
On the
That's
fee,
an
in the
example
fee
of
schedule?
a personal event on the fee schedule.
Oh, yeah. That's not part of the
basically
statute.
free.
We're trying to clarify for you things that are not, that we really aren't interested in.
I appreciate that, but when you have that next to the, or almost next to the yard sale, then it leads me to believe that, oh, I must have to call and get permission because I do for a yard sale.
When we talk about birthdays, it's also right next to the word weddings, and currently, people complain a lot, at least because I've been working on this, I've gotten a lot of complaints from people about how difficult it is for them to go out and do a simple wedding on the beach. We made them jump through all of these hoops. Whereas if you have a huge birthday party and you invite 24 people to your house and they all park along the street, then maybe you do need a special event permit.
That
If your
threshold,
wife brings you a cake home, we're not going to make you,
that threshold is defined where? I'm not trying to be
it would be
difficult.
under the special event definition.
If you have more than how many people, then you have to call the town.
It's not defined by number of people. It's an activity within the boundaries of the town of Fort Myers Beach that which would inhibit the usual flow of pedestrian or vehicular travel or occupies a public area. It goes on and has some
So if my
definitions.
birthday didn't do that, I wouldn't have to.
You wouldn't have to.
Right. And then on the fees, Roger, do those reflect the actual cost to the town in terms of additional burden, or are those more arbitrary in nature? In other words, we're not trying to raise revenue, I hope, through these fees. I hope they reflect the additional burden placed upon staff.
Actually, I can tell you, we put pressure on Roger that they not reflect the actual cost of the town, that we wanted to be generous and say, there's a lot of things we're not going to charge you for. So we actually put pressure on Roger to allow us to have a lot of free categories and to give a reduction for nonprofits.
Okay.
The emphasis that I read from the Vice Mayor's initiative was that it's more advantageous that people come in and notify us what they're doing, whether it's free or for a fee. We know what's going on, and that we can provide them the guidance, and it is to say, you didn't do something and we're going to come after you. So we thought by keeping the fees to an absolute minimum, we're encouraging people to share their plans with us so that we can provide them with guidance.
You know, garage sale thing, I'm still stuck on that. I have an issue with a homeowner having to call and work with the town to get permission.
And if the majority of council
Yeah.
wants to take it out, it's fine with me.
And it's not, it's more because, I mean, if we're being honest, the permit process is not exactly easy. Nothing seems to be able to be done electronically. You can't just, I mean, if you want to change an address on a water, changing service of a water, it requires you to come down to town hall to write 3 numbers and a new street name on it. It can't be done digitally. It's a huge waste of their time. It's a huge waste of town resource time. So this is just adding to that. Now, if I want to have a garage sale, I have to come down to town hall to fill out a form.
Dan, I said to you,
I'm just trying to
I
make my
put
point
it
of some
in
of the stuff
because
that.
most other jurisdictions had it. It's me, if 3 of you want to take it out, it's fine with me. It just gives the town a way to regulate if someone's abusing their neighbors by having lots of.
And I don't think people would have an issue with telling the town what they're doing if it was easy for them to do. You know, if it's the middle of season and I'm on the south end and I have to go to town hall to fill out a form to have a garage sale that weekend, I'm not gonna be very happy. If I could log into the town's website, fill out the form and submit it, and within 24 hours I get
And
something back.
that's
it'd be
something we could
different.
work on after we get this passed, but we
Yeah,
can't create the form
well,
until after we have.
Let's be
the-
clear, no one has to come to town hall right now because the doors are locked, except when you guys are in
Correct.
session. So let's be clear about that. We try to get all our forms online so people can just download them, fill them out, and send them back to us. People who are not technologically advanced, we have a small segment of the population who can't do that. We'll take an email if you give us that basic information, even if you whatever. Then you have people who they're still on hardwired landlines. You just deal with those people. But the real point of this is not the person who has cleans. I don't know. I guess April is when you do spring cleaning. Once a year does a garage sale in April. It's the people who, as the Vice Mayor mentioned, or someone mentioned, was, to do this on a regular basis to the point where it's disruptive to the neighborhood, because it is a disruption with cars coming in and parking all over the place while they're looking over whatever it is you're selling. So there's a process problem. That doesn't mean that the ordinance is bad. It just means we have a bad process and we need to fix it. So my suggestion is not to, if you think it's something that the town should be aware of and there should be some limit, then it should be in the ordinance. If there's a process problem, we'll fix the process problem.
Okay. We'll move this along then, right? With all the changes that are made, and have it come back to us in another form and take another crack at it.
I like the fact that it's going to go through the LPA as well. There you
go.
Is that my understanding?
There you go. And,
John,
just,
could you let me know when that is? Because since I'm the only one left who did. Jason, and not criticizing, Jason has no idea because he wasn't at any of the meetings, so if there are questions, I'd be happy to be there.
He was briefed by Sarah, but he didn't work with her on it, but he.
Oh, yeah, I mean, the discussions we had,
Yeah, thank you, Madam Vice Mayor. This is a daunting task. It's a lot of work.
it was.
Thanks
It was-
for
Staff
saying.
was super to work with, I've got to say that.
okay. The next item is F, ODC Section 34-639, permitting survey requirements. Proceed with text amendments to LDC Section 34-639 regarding permitting survey requirements, or wait for review of the entire code. Please,
Good morning. I'll just give you a summary of what this is trying to accomplish. The code-
identification, please.
Sorry? Jason Green, redevelopment, sorry about that. The code already has a section where it requires surveys at certain times. There's some flexibility and specific requirements in that. What we were trying to do is, one, clarify and clean that up based on the processes that we have in place today, but also to add a couple areas that'll make, we hope will make life easier. So the ultimate goal is to try to undo some of the bottlenecks at the end of projects that cause some of the most stress, but also to have, what I'll say at the end of the project, again, as-built confirmation of some of your regulations like stormwater. Instead of having inspector from the town go out there, essentially it adds an as-built inspection, as-built survey from the engineer, from the surveyor. The engineer that designed it confirms, and they send us a letter saying it was built to their. Essentially, it takes a page out of what all engineers across Florida deal with on every other project except for single family. Here in Fort Myers Beach, obviously, we have a single family stormwater requirement. So it just takes a page out of that book and duplicates that process. So anybody designing these sites shouldn't have any difference in the process that they normally. So we're trying to do that just to make it easier, make it quicker, and frankly, shift the liability, because not regular planners or maybe somebody on the building staff might not necessarily have experience in stormwater and not be able to verify that that stormwater was designed and built to design standards. Other than that, it's cleaning up and adding some things and some clarifications on the square footages and that section.
Hey, let me just say very simply, if you're a property owner, you hire an engineer to design your project, and you build it, your contractor builds it, and your engineer comes back and says that it was built in accordance with the plan, why do we have to do that? That's what this will allow.
Too often, we're the interface between the builder and the engineer, and we're trying to remove ourselves from that process and make the parties that have been the ones designing and building it verify that it was built to. We approve the plan, we go and build it and confirm.
Rightfully so. Questions, Jason?
I don't have a question. I would say let's go forward with it and not wait for the review of the entire code as is posed.
This is intended to move forward and not wait. If something needs to be adjusted as we implement this, as I've told several builders and engineers, we can, through the other code, we can adjust it, but we want to get this in place so we hopefully make life easier at the back end of the end.
Okay. I think the consensus is to move forward, right?
This
Is
will
that a
be,
yes?
Yeah,
That's a yes, right?
well, I'm not hearing any audible responses.
Yes.
There's another yes, there's another yes.
Okay,
that's-
thank
so
you.
just so you know, the intent will be to be on this month's LPA, and then I hope that your first reading will actually be on the 21st, unless we bump it to October.
You have down here driveways, so if someone changes their driveway, then they have to have a process done, surveys, engineering.
As built, yeah, so essentially, if you're modifying town right-of-way, then it's standard to have that be included with that, and the surveyor has to go out there anyway, so if they're doing a new driveway with a new pool, for example, a new stormwater, they would.
Just to be clear, you're afforded the same right under the building code. You can hire your own inspector. Hire a certified inspector and have them do your building inspections on your project. All we're doing is basically saying, as it pertains to stormwater, you could do the same thing. You use your engineer.
But it's not, if you're just replacing surface or something on the driveway, it's not required for that. Paving or putting pavers down or re-asphalting, that's not.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Next item is G, professional service agreement renewals. An RFQ-19-17-AD, ongoing miscellaneous professional services. Roger?
Mr. Mayor, members of the council, we maintain a pool of professional companies to assist the town in getting minor projects done throughout the course of the year. So it's sort of two phases. One phase is we have certain companies that were approved last year by the council and continue as an extension of their contract, and that's this group that's before you today. Then we have a second group, then we reopen it to other firms, because we have some firms that drop off throughout the process or are not necessarily interested in continuing to work with us. And we invite other firms to be part of this pool of firms to be available to us for minor projects throughout the year. So this is to let you know of the existing firms. There's a list provided, and to let you know that we have received proposals from 28 additional firms. So if those become approved by the council at an upcoming meeting, then the list and those firms would then be part of our pool for the upcoming year.
guess my comment would be, I'd be fine with this type of thing going straight to a council meeting. I don't know why it needs to be on an MMP.
Well, we kind of talked about that internally, and because we had 3 new council members, part of council, we weren't sure how familiar they were with this process. We wanted to sort of use this as a way to introduce them, so if they had a question, they could ask between now and the time it comes back to town council for approval, so we don't have to go through sort of that educational process at the council meeting.
And Bill was out of the room when you said that.
That's all right.
Bill, I asked,
Bill talks to me every week. We have a regularly scheduled appointment, so we go over all
I asked
that.
why this was on an MMP, a town council meeting, that we could just go ahead and approve it, and he said he put it on an MMP because of 3 new council members in case you guys had questions.
Oh, okay.
So that means in the future, you won't have to put these on MMPs because they'll be familiar with the process.
Correct.
Okay.
Official no? Okay. All right, next item is the fleet purchase, trade-in, and purchase of the pallet truck. Roger.
Right, so our first look at this was we recognized we needed a pallet truck, and then as part of that decision-making process, I'm always careful about adding vehicles to the fleet. I said, I always ask the staff, if we bought this, is there something we could eliminate, or the fleet doesn't just continually grow as we identify these needs? So the public works staff came back and said, we have this existing truck that was a great idea back in 2014 when we bought it, but not so much today. So I said, let's see if we can arrange to trade that in and get this truck and try to keep our fleet lean and trim, our total fleet, and take advantage of getting rid of a truck that we don't use very often and is causing us not quite fulfilling all the goals we had hoped for it. So by trading in a truck, we're getting about $20,000 plus to reduce the cost of the equipment that we actually do need.
You've got the same rule at home. You buy a new pair of shoes, you got to throw a whole pair out. It's a good
Oh, yeah.
process.
Is anyone paying you 20 grand for your old shoes?
Well, we're not quite a Mel DeMarcos, but okay. Any questions about the fleet?
I'm in favor of it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Everybody's fine. Okay. Next item is communication plan fiscal year 2021.
Okay, so I assume Jenny will be walking in a moment. What I tasked our Jenny Dexter to do is sit down with every department director and develop a plan in terms of what their needs were in terms of public information and social media, identify what the item was and the frequency of that item, whether it needed to be daily, weekly, monthly, annually, to, in essence, have her develop an agreement. If Jenny was a private contract, it would be a contract, but basically a conceptual agreement as to what products she would be producing for each department, so that she can meet their expectations. They knew that we wouldn't have a case where they said, I thought she was doing it, and she said, I thought they were doing it, and get all that identified sort of on one piece of paper, so everyone knows what the work plan is for the upcoming fiscal year. So in addition to working on new website, the ongoing TextMyGov things that we've done, I think most of you have seen our new weekly newsletter that we're putting out every week. Prior, we only had a once a month top 10. Now we have a weekly newsletter that we're sending out electronically every week. Those things, of course, will continue. Incidental issues that pop up, of course, will continue, but this was to share with you the understanding between Jenny and her colleagues as to what she will be working on for them throughout the upcoming fiscal year. And basically, those of you who support bringing the PIO position on board show that it's a very full, robust schedule in terms of things that she'll be working on. And this represents a lot of the things that the directors never got around to because they were so busy doing other things. So if you have any questions, he's here to answer those.
Questions?
I actually have a couple questions, if I could, quickly. The weekly newsletter that you just referenced, is that sent to members of the council? Because I've not seen it. How is it disseminated?
You're signed up on the website.
Identify yourself, please.
Jenny Dexter, Communications Coordinator, PIO, the town of Fort Myers Beach.
Very thorough.
Signed up to receive notifications from the website. That's where we send it to, and it's sent to about 865 people who are already signed up as with their email on the website.
You add all the council members? That'd be great. And
I'm already on there on my private email, so you don't have to put me on twice.
can you also tweet that out too, that people could sign up for that? Or maybe you've already,
Yes, we have been doing that too, but yes.
excellent.
We regularly, it's in our regular social media routine message thing.
And it was certainly against my instincts for smaller government, but I was supportive of the PIO position. And one of the things I would love to see from the PIO is a regular communication, and you could put it in a weekly newsletter. It could go, I'd love to see a weekly or a monthly column to the Observer or to Beach Talk Radio's new newsletter or to both. Preferably love to have it from the town manager, but if it's from you, I think the town needs to begin to communicate better with its citizenry with respect to compliance. In other words, I would grab your code enforcement people, Jason and others, Roger, figure out where the areas in this town where we're in conflict with our citizenry with respect to where we're fining, where we're issuing penalties or violations, find out where that is, and then let's start reaching out to our public and explain, hey, if you're putting in a driveway, here are the 5 things you need to think about proactively. Or here's what we're seeing in our code enforcement division. Here's where the biggest issue, here's where we're writing the most tickets. We don't want to do that. But so here's how you can avoid it. And work through everything we can think about with respect to code enforcement, penalties, fines, zoning, permitting. Every opportunity you can get to educate our citizenry so we can work cooperatively with them. I do think this garage sale is a great example. How would anybody know that they're supposed to call the town? So let's look at that. And the goal would be, if we had a big thermometer for how much we raise each year in terms of fines and so forth from our citizenry, the goal is to bring that number down because people are educated, they know in advance as to what the issues are, and hopefully that brings folks into compliance in a way that we can work cooperatively with our citizenry as opposed to this adversarial sort of situation. So any opportunity you can do to further that, I think the PIO could be really helpful in furthering that cause. Side piece just to add to your list, and maybe it doesn't belong on this list, but I'd love to sit down with you too on this Snowbird Advocacy Program for clean water that we're going to be taking on when season comes, and we'll kind of begin to strategize a little bit about that. I'd love to pick your brain on that and forth a formal plan of attack on that. So sorry I had to get on my soapbox on that, but I feel very strongly about that. I think it's a great opportunity for this town with your employment to get folks educated and informed and work cooperatively in a way that we reduce the amount of fines and penalties and other situations that put ourselves in this adversarial dynamic with our own citizenry. So any opportunity you can do, I'll help with that. I mean, if you need people, if you need council members to write letter or to do op-ed pieces or letter spotlights, we've got earned media is a great way to get the word out. So I know you know that, but I just wanted to reiterate it. Thank you.
I'd jump in on that and say I agree with Jim. I think that's a great idea. The more we can educate the public, the better. My question on this is the very top section. Do you mean to say elected officials rather than appointed officials?
We intentionally did appointed.
Okay. Well, then town council isn't on here anywhere, and I'd like us to have a category that you put out news about what we've done and why we've done it, and et cetera, et cetera. I don't know if anybody else agrees with that, but with the loss of the sandpaper I would really like to make sure that we're getting out word on what it is we're doing and why. So,
One thing that we just implemented that I'm not sure you guys are aware of, but we are doing a press release every time we have a council meeting. And with the highlights, the public information about it, not the twist on it that some
Pre or post, Jenny?
after the
Immediately
meeting.
thereafter, so our goal is within 24 hours of the meeting to put out information on the decisions that were reached by council.
who does that go to?
It goes to all the
Media.
news stations in Lee County. It goes
So they
to
can choose to pick and choose from it, and we don't know what was in the, could you send it to us so that we know what the full copy was? Because when Wink puts something on and they don't tell the whole story, I'd like to know whether you've given them the information or not, for example, not to pick on Wink, but
I'd like to see, if you could just add us to your press list, I'd love to see the press
yeah,
list
I'd
that
like to
come
be
out
on
of
the
the
press
town.
list
Yeah.
so that we know what you did send out to them.
And it also goes to the Observer and the News Press. I mean, any reporter that I've had a contact with since I've been here, it's about 20, 25 people so far.
Great.
They're all getting it. And also, the news, the weekly digital that Roger mentioned, we are taking a couple of different items from council meetings and MNP and highlighting those in more detail during those weekly. So that's the whole plan with those two, and the monthly also.
Those newsletters are all archived on your website?
Not yet.
They
will be.
We can go back and look at them, okay. Great.
I mean, I can send them all to you too. This is week 5 on the weekly, and the monthlies are up for a month, and then we take,
Did you have
the news is old by then.
Did you have a good interaction with the folks from the sheriff's
Did,
office today?
yes, yeah, very good. We've already emailed back and forth, so that's good. I've started a relationship with the fire department too, the PIO for that, so.
So y'all know Mayor Murphy had to leave and asked that I take over the meeting, so I'm not just taking over. He asked that I do
I also have to catch a flight, so
Okay.
I have to duck out now as well.
Well, we still have a quorum.
Okay.
Workshop, we don't need a quorum.
That's true.
What kind of usage are you getting with this TextMyGov?
We have had, as of end of last week, about 1,000 texts just between July 1st.
That's great.
We launched. We are promoting it more on social media, and I just did a press release that I'm hoping will be picked up. We'll see. And we'll be doing that more and more as the time goes on. We also have the little widget in the corner of the website. I've noticed this week especially that people are asking questions that aren't on our frequently asked questions on the TextMyGov. So as soon as I get a question that we don't have programmed yet, I program it into TextMyGov. So I'm really excited about how well it's launched.
So you have the floor, would you just take a second and explain TextMyGov, in case anybody's still listening?
It's a phone number 239 FM Beach. It's our very own phone number, and actually TextMyGov had never done a vanity phone number before, so we're the first town, city, municipality that they've worked with that has a vanity number, which came with its own challenges, but that's okay, we got it done. So, and what it is people can text that number, and just all they got to do is text hi, or really any word will bring up an introduction and will tell them more words to text or whatever information they want. For instance, if they want to know if the beach is open, they just put in beach and it comes up with information about, yes, we're open, we are requiring masks if you can't social distance, and here's the access points that you can get to. And beach walks also are programmed in there. So it's a way for people who use texting, which we know most people do, to be able to get quick information 24/7 and not have to interact with the staff.
The other part is, we could link you to our webpage. We are in the process of starting a total redesign of our website, but besides getting an answer to your question, you could click on a link that's provided back in response to your question and takes you right to that webpage for the town.
It's, it's not completely filled out yet, so we're continuing to evolve, and we will continue to. We can also we can do it very quick. Very quick. Hurricanes are coming, and we can make our intro be something about hurricanes and prepare.
What's the latest with the town app? That's something we decided not to do of the TextMyGov.
Now, there are, with the redesign of the website, we would have an option to add on payment for an app to be developed, but it's right now not on the radar.
That's what you guys spend a lot of time in your committee.
CRAB had a prototype that a member of CRAB voluntarily.
I have used a lot of that information that you guys did for TextMyGov, because it was a great roadmap for me to understand from your perspective what kind of information you wanted out there. And we also will use that roadmap too for the redesign of the website. I'm using it. So.
And one of the big drivers for that was a button where someone could hit it and say, where's the closest bathroom? That was where it started.
Yeah.
I don't know if there's anything that we have that really replaces that.
Nice for parking, too.
So we do have parking programmed in TextMyGov, and we beefed up the website to include the passport app download instruction.
I've talked to the chamber about, they enhance information on their website. We can point to it. So if you say, where's private parking available? If they have a page that shows that, we can direct the person to that page. And if they even want to go as far as there are spaces available or not spaces available on their page, we'll direct that inquiry to that page.
Now with the town parking, there's an app for that, right?
There's an app to pay for parking. There's a phone number to pay for parking that we're putting in place.
Does the app for paying, does it also tell people where parking is?
Well, the app, what it really is you go to the app and you say that I'm at parking spot 23. It's really more of a payment system. It's not where are the parking spaces in town. That's covered. We have that reference of those locations, I believe, on TextMyGov, or we point to that page on our webpage.
But it doesn't tell people whether they can park on Coconut Street if there's a space there.
No, it does not. We're not at that level yet, but we'll get there.
A lot of evolving to do.
And is this payment site, is this through who coordinates payment? Is it the town administered, or is it administered by the people who do the parking? It's administered by a private company. We're just a client of that company.
Any other questions? The only other thing I was thinking of asking, we haven't had a lot of big events going on since COVID's been going on, since you've been with us, Jennifer. But say there's going to be a big event at the Mound House. Are they still going to be doing their own publicity in addition to you about
exactly
special
how-
events? Is that the difference? You're going to be doing the day-to-day kind of thing, and you, of course, would mention a special event, but over and above for special, bigger events?
That was exactly part of that discussion that, all the friends of, we have several friends of on the island, that everyone's saying, well, for the last 10 years, we've been doing this. On high to pay, now I don't need to do it anymore. And we had no idea, and we weren't going to be doing it. So we wanted to be very clear with all the directors who interface with those respective friends groups and community groups. What's on Jennifer's list, and she will do. What's not on our list doesn't mean we won't work collaboratively with them and cooperate with them. It just means that they're still the point person.
Right. And, for example, with the Friends of the Mound House, there are TDC funds that they apply for publicity purposes, that it's much easier for them as a nonprofit to get than for the town to get. So there is going to be this bifurcation still, and I wanted to make
I
sure.
call it augmentation. Yes.
Augmentation is a great word, too.
That's a great way to put it. I appreciate you saying it that way.
Any other questions? Does anybody object to her adding a category for us elected officials? I'd like us to have
Oh,
a
that's a
column
good
of our
idea.
own.
I'd like to know what's going on.
I like that too, but I would also see if there's a way to add a category to work with compliance, code enforcement, and permitting, all of those various enforcement entities, Jason's group, building permits. We can explain to the public what our process is, what you need to watch out for, what we're seeing, trends. This is where the most fines are going out in this area, and here's how we can all work together to try to mitigate it if we work together doing A, B, and C. I just think that's really helpful, because a lot of folks, especially if they're new to the island, they just don't know all the ins and outs of our system, and they may.
Maybe it could be a joint category, code enforcement / law enforcement, so if she's putting out stuff in conjunction with the sheriff to educate people.
That's
It
fine. I
could
just
be
think this
that category.
this is a little different though, because this is an area where there's so much. If you're a homeowner and you've got all these, if you make any adjustment to your home internally or externally, yard wise, there's just things you need to know about and and a lot of problems are alleviated if you preemptively come to the town. I think that's an opportunity for us to explain that to people, because it seems like a lot of the challenges, and Roger deals with this every day, but it's like, oh, I wish I would have known that, or a claim I didn't know, and I know ignorance of the law is no excuse, but when you have a lot of different minutia in these ordinances and regulations, it's sure helpful for us to do outreach to try to eliminate any potential conflict down the road, so.
Yeah, we definitely want to do that.
I just think it's a little different though than the public safety piece, just a little bit different.
Council Adderall, we definitely want to encourage that. People who reach out to us in advance is always a wanted and desirable thing, particularly when they're truthful as to what they're doing, and clear with us what they're going to be doing. It's kind of amazing to me, the people who will call us 6 times a year to find out if their hurricane pass is still good, will embark on a project on their house or do something without picking up the phone and call us. So we just encourage everyone to reach out to us, and we'll do everything we can to help them through whatever it is they're trying to do.
I believe that. I just think a lot of people don't even think to call because they just don't know that these things are required. And I think that would really be a useful purpose.
Maybe the way to start it is, there are a lot of rules here compared to other places I've been. We're also on a barrier island, a lot of risk.
There's a lot of reasons, yeah. I'm not.
Maybe the first thing is the open thing is just like, live on a barrier island, there's a lot of regulations related to that. Then
Here's why we
you
have
open
them.
the conversation,
Yeah,
and
sure.
then start going through, okay, maybe whatever the biggest typical conflict to get, like if it's fences. I see fences come up a lot. Want to replace my fence, how do you do it?
You do it the right way.
Yeah.
Jennifer, do you have anything else you need to add for us?
No, thank you for all the content and the support, and I'm looking forward to continuing to work with you. So.
And I want to say for myself, I'm so glad you're here, and I think it's helping, and it's that we have you, and I appreciate you.
No.
Okay, moving on to agenda management. Anybody have any questions about the schedule of agenda management or suggestions for additions?
One thing I'd like to talk about, you went on to one of the initial topics here is what's the process for getting things on both the regular council meeting agendas and in the agenda planning? There were a couple of things that came up that said the council indicated. How does that work?
Unfortunately, we're missing 2 people, so maybe we should have that discussion when we've got all 5 people here to make sure that.
Madam Mayor, let me just say my understanding of how it currently works. Obviously, you all could change that at any time. At either a council meeting, primarily at a council meeting, because these are management meeting of what happens at a council meeting. But at a council meeting, someone will say, I would like to discuss a particular topic or look at a particular section of code, or I have this new initiative, or whatever item of interest is. They'll usually raise that under council comments towards the end of the agenda. They would say, I would like to have a discussion, since you can only discuss things at public meetings with your colleagues, I would like to have a discussion on this matter with my colleagues. And the past sort of rule was that if at least two people weren't interested in having that discussion, didn't make it on a M&P for a detailed discussion of that matter. So, council meetings, you should suggest a topic. When your colleagues say, yes, that's a good idea, or there's merit in discussing that item, it's put on the M&P, you discuss it to get it to a point where it appears to be close to being a resolution, or close to being an ordinance, or close to being a modification of existing resolution, or close to being a modification of existing ordinance. We put it on the agenda for subsequent approval. Whether it's a one reading or two reading item, if it has to go in front of a committee, we put it in a committee, then one reading, two readings, whatever the case may be. The general idea is that the vetting of the issue happens at these M&P sessions. And sort of the last minute wordsmithing, if to the extent it's needed, as well as public input, happens at the council meeting.
It's my understanding, at least in the past, before town council agendas were published, that you sit down with the mayor and go over them. Is that still the case?
The agenda is shared with the mayor. If they have any input, and generally that would be more of, let's put this before that, because I think there'll be a lot of people here speaking to that issue, and we don't want to keep them waiting. More of that stuff is not what's on the agenda, it's where it's on the agenda.
Okay.
A question with respect to what happened this morning with respect to this community policing proposal. I don't think that it's necessarily an ordinance per se, maybe it is, but it's certainly a budget issue. Should we choose to proceed on that, what is the next step for the community policing proposal that we heard this morning? Would that fit into our budget process this month?
There's a couple things. One is that if the council made a decision that it wanted to move forward in doing that, we would have to up an agreement with the sheriff to collect amount of money, the duration, and with some clarity, the scope of services. Part A. Part B is, and parallel to that would be, how do we fund that? The captain put out some preliminary costs to you all this morning. Right now, that's not in our budget. As you may recall, the budget in terms of the millage can't go up, they go down or stay the same. So if that becomes a council priority at this point in time, considering where we are in the process, we'll have to bring back some alternatives on how to try to fund it, which possibly would result in curtailing doing something else to fund this.
Roger, would it be fair to say that another course of action would be to utilize reserves for this, particularly since it's a pilot
Always
program?
take money out of your reserves, but just remember, when you do, if the reserve amount is correct today, making that assumption, the reserve is there for a purpose today, and you decide to, well, this is an important purpose, let's take money out of the reserve, do that, widget, whatever it is. Remember, next year you have to pay for the widget to continue, and you have to backfill your reserve, so you get a double hit. That's true, you can't take the money out of reserves.
Just for the record, before you keep going down this path, I'm really not in favor of going down this road. I think Bonita Springs set a really bad precedent by doing this. It leads to more affluent communities paying for extra police protection, whereas maybe somebody in Lehigh, they don't have the tax base to afford such a situation. To me, there is a duty of the Lee County Sheriff to provide law enforcement for your community. And if we have to negotiate with them what those expectations are, and maybe even take our concerns to the county commissioners that they need more funding, I think that's the way that we should go. Because if you don't, we would be perpetuating this system where more affluent communities get better police protection because they can afford it, and other communities are not. And
I think that's a very fair point. And I think that's sort of the struggle that I'm wrestling with, is that, do I want to wrestle with the world as it is, or how I want it to be? And as it is, it does appear as if the more affluent communities get additional protection because they can afford it. But at the same time, I also have to be concerned about, our public safety needs here on the island. So it's a quandary. But I do love the concept of having 2 full-time officers here and assigned to the island who aren't doing 911 calls, and they're literally engaging in community policing that can proactively, because you made a good point 2 meetings ago about why isn't the sheriff's office proactively going undercover and getting to, and involving itself in preventative policing. I think that's really what community policing is. So it is a struggle, but I think it's something that we need to continue to be open to, because it is a unique form of policing that we can say it'd be nice if the sheriff's office would have provided otherwise, but my sense was, having talked to these folks, that we're not going to get it, no matter how much we complain, because they've already apportioned the services out, and this is what we're getting, and if we want more, we have to pay for it. So I'm not saying I'm happy with that. Your point's well taken. But it does seem to be the reality in which we're working with right now.
Well, I think
We haven't even approached other communities and said, hey, let's go to the commissioners and say we have a higher expectation for our county
That's fair.
officials.
But
We haven't even tried.
But you can imagine that scenario if we go and ask for the county commissioners to apportion additional resources to the sheriff. We can have additional resources. It's almost a circular argument, because every other community is going to want additional resources as well.
No, I'm saying we do it as all the communities together, that we ask it for everyone.
I just want to jump in here for a second and just say that there's always going to be an issue between municipalities and the county from the perspective of, they're going to say, we're paying for X, and if you want more than X, you're going to have to pay the difference. And either through frustration or political pressure from your constituents or whatever, your natural inclinations, well, I can't get them to move, so therefore, and something has to be done, so therefore I have to move locally and do something within the town. And that's landscaping, that's a lot of different things, that street lighting, a lot of different subject matters. So I just want to sort of remind you that, one of the reasons why I asked them how many officers they have was to put a perspective of the amount of how many are here locally, signed here locally. That's an administrative decision being made by sheriff based on calls and other things, and I'm sure if the needs were greater here, he would be appropriate within his overall number to where the needs are. But if the 600 number, I believe he said, if that's inadequate, he needs to go to the county commission and I'd say I need 625 or 650 or 700 or whatever it is. And yeah, that's not going to dump a number in 1 year, but if he sees that need coming, he and we, with our support, should be going to them and saying, hey, over the next 5 years, we need to add 100 officers, and let's add some each year. Because we're paying those taxes too. It's not like, well, we're just paying these, we're paying those as well. So I think we have, we're appropriate to have those discussions with them. Sure, every elected official wants to walk into town hall or talk to their constituents and say, I didn't raise the millage. I kept the millage the same as last year, or I rolled it back, or whatever it is. Well, you guys have recognized the need that we had locally, and last year the council raised the millage to deal with it. And it sounds like you guys are going to be supportive of doing that next year. And sometimes they're going to have to look at it and say, you know what, we have a problem or an issue that needs attention, and we have to raise the millage. And it can't always be, well, we're always going to keep our millage locked at a certain number, and if you want anything above that, you, the municipalities will have to pay for it. That's a huge sort of philosophical conversation, really needs to be got in depth by all of you and the 5 of you are here.
I think too that, it's a more complex picture than just should we have a nuisance abatement board or should we have community policing. There's a lot of different aspects, things like I've mentioned, cameras, neighborhood watch programs. Some things are pretty easy to get some implement, like we talked about, Jenny, sending out writing stories and stuff. We could have a story about neighborhood watch and how to set up a neighborhood watch program, people that are interested. But to me, it makes sense that maybe we take a longer term view of this, because also things like if we did have a nuisance abatement board, that also we need the sheriff's cooperation with that, and that way works in more with the community policing. So there's a whole lot of interaction going that maybe, and we have a public safety committee. Well, maybe we should send all these bits of information to the public safety committee and say, look at the numbers, look at the plans. Because I understand what Roxanne is saying, that's a good point. And when I was talking to the sheriffs, the impression I got, and it was very reminiscent of, I think, street lights and landscape and everything else, is the attitude with the county is pretty much, well, Fort Myers Beach can afford it. Like they did with the resource officer here. It's like they don't want to put in the street lighting along Sarah Boulevard, and they know that we'll eventually step up and pay for it, and they won't have to. And that seems to be the way with the community policing. I was really surprised talking to them about Bonita Springs, that Bonita Springs has 40,000 people, and they have the same allocation of resources we do without paying extra. And instead of getting 2 community policing officers, they have I think it's at 16. They're paying an enormous amount of money for this additional policing.
The impression I had from the 3 law enforcement officers, again, collectively having about 100 years of experience, is principle, you're absolutely correct, but in reality, just not going to happen. If you want the 2 community policing officers, you're going to have to pony up. So I'm sympathetic to your argument, but the reality of it is I want to be pragmatic about it, and that's why I'm still open to the concept. But, again, this is preliminary and we're still learning a lot, but I'm sympathetic to the idea.
I think, too, that if what they're saying about the island is true in Lee County, that the crime rates are going down, it'd be a hard sell to get more money for police when you have is driving crime rates down.
It sounds like the officers assigned to Ireland, although honorable in doing their job, they're spending a lot of their time making runs. And if you have 2 people assigned here as community policing officers, they can actually be engaged in the community and involved and go deeper that currently isn't being done. And I think that could be really helpful on a number of fronts. But, again, I'm open to the conversation.
Well, and I would say that 2 sounds like overkill to me for community involvement. I mean, if they're there to give tickets to people that are on e-bikes and interact with the community, I would say 1 would be plenty. And 1 during season, and maybe during the summertime, we don't need that person. 2 year round seems like a very arbitrary number to me, considering how we ebb and flow with our population. And
that's a fair point. I asked that very question. I said, could we just start with 1? And they said, absolutely not. You have to have 2 because they pair with each other. They sub for each other when they're on vacation and when they're on leave and on training, and then they back each other up. So their model is such where they start with a minimum of 2, because I asked that very question. It's a fair point, but they said no. That's, to be honest with you, that's what they said.
well, and that's typical, we want to work with you to do this, but then when we say, well, could we try 1, the answer is no.
Madam Vice Mayor, I just want to touch on the point. Councilor Adderall, your point about it will not be easy is nothing's closer to the truth. It won't be easy. Because it's a shift of paradigm, their perspective. So it is going to be extremely hard to make a message. But I think one of the things you have in your favor is that, they're looking at it as the geographical limits of Fort Myers Beach. What perhaps they're not looking at is the county has 3 parks here. This is a major tourist destination in the county. People from all outside Fort Myers Beach but live in Lee County are all coming here to recreate. People from the other 49 states and the territories are coming here to recreate. People from Europe are coming here to recreate. And So
I
there's,
don't
there's a,
disagree with
there's
anything
a,
you're saying,
so
yeah.
there's a sort of delineation you could think about between what is the local policing need of the town versus what are some of these other needs that are being created by other things. And obviously, all that may fall on deaf ears, but I do think that this is just not a case where it's all local residential municipality and, we just want more,
It's a very fair point. I made that argument to the three officers, and they nodded, and they said, that sounds great, not disagreeing with the factual nature of your comments, but it's going to happen. But again, it doesn't mean we shouldn't try. It doesn't mean we should make that argument. Maybe we could do them maybe they're just two strategies are not mutually exclusive. Maybe we do it at the same time that we're pushing. I don't know. I'm just thinking through it.
Certainly another point, it goes back to kind of Roxanne's point about, healthy neighborhoods get better policing. The shooting at Atlantic kind of made a lot of noise, or made a lot of news. And a lot of that is a reason because it's on Fort Myers Beach. Fort Myers Beach makes news because it's everyone's playground. But then since then, there have been other shootings. They haven't raised the same kind of noise level that the Atlantic guy did. Another thing too, one thing about is, what's the sense of urgency of this? Because like Roger said, we've set the rate now. We're kind of getting pretty close to wrapping up the budget this year. Instead of dipping into our reserves, is this something that we can put off for a year? We can analyze different alternatives. One thing that came up, like the idea of, if you get a community police officer, does that lessen the need for a nuisance abatement board? Because now you have somebody who can do a lot of the things that were the constructive part of what I saw in Fort Lauderdale. Like, instead of having someone get called in, have more of an open, proactive, but voluntary program where businesses can have the community police officer go through and say, look at your property, what can you do to, minimize criminal activity on a voluntary process instead of going through a board.
I think that's a very fair point, My biggest fear is we don't do anything on either front, and then and as we watch the island evolve, we've got a lot of vacant lots on the north end of the island that will soon be developed, and it'll be a very prosperous, hopefully positive dynamic, which I think it will. But in the interim, we have this sort of transitional period where maybe we need that little shot in the arm of community policing to get us over that hump. And maybe it is a pilot project. Maybe it only lasts for a year and a half, 2 years, whatever it takes to get up and running on the north end of the island when things get developed and upgraded, particularly with the Times Square renovation, all the other good things we're doing on this island. So, just again, my hope is we don't sit tight and do nothing, because we're making progress, and you can feel the movement and the pressure, and things are going in a good direction, and just want to continue to be active.
Anybody have anything else for agenda management? Any additions?
One thing, I don't know if this really belongs here or somewhere else, but, and I've talked with Roger about this, a lot of things came up with the idea that, down at Bayfront Park, there's not a sign to the public bathroom that was put in the condition of that development. The idea came up is that we put signs, like the signposts that have lots of arrows go different directions. Point from every point of interest we have on the island, it points to the other points of interest and things like bathrooms and whatnot. So at Bayfront Park, there'd be an arrow saying where Times Square was, maybe where Newton Park is and Mound House, where the dinghy dock is, and each one of the signs would be like some kind of this color palette. Every location would have a different color or a different type of sign to give it that kind of random flavor. It's something that would be easy to implement and wouldn't cost a lot of money.
It's like a good idea, Bill. I like that.
But then how do we get it done is the question. Starting the budget cycle.
Part of it might be in a future TDC request.
Well, I think one of the things, I think if you like the idea, then the next thing is to, my mind's eye is to assign it to a committee, have them sort of, select the locations, kind of see if they can kind of figure out what they would like the sign to be and how they would like the sign to function, whether it's the multiple arrows or whether it's, a different type of decorative sign. And we discuss how we can maybe fund it in the short term or TDC or how we go about doing that, but sort of put together a little plan around that concept.
Is CRAB your committee?
Yes.
Bill?
I can bring it up to their meeting coming up.
Yeah, you have my vote to bring it up to
I
CRAB.
support that too, Bill, and I think one of the things to think about is what we just discussed about with this ADA challenge, is that I think your idea could be incorporated in some of the ongoing projects now. We've got funding for Bayside, we've got funding for Times Square, we've got funding for Bay Oaks, and I know Newton Park's looking at some new signage, so maybe we just build that into existing projects so it wouldn't be such an astronomical cost, because we could use existing money that's allocated to these projects to incorporate your idea. You know what I mean? In part.
Or maybe that's the pilot part of it. We put these signs in these new development projects. So put one on Times Square, put one in Bayfront Park, put one in Bay Oaks. I'll bring it up to CRAB.
Okay, anything else for agenda
Just on
management?
that same issue, there's been a lot of constituent correspondence on this. Is Snug Harbor required to put up the restroom sign, or are we supposed to put up the restroom sign?
We're putting up a sign at Bayside Park pointing to Snug Harbor's public restroom. They have signs, but you have to physically be there to see them.
It's the town's responsibility, or we just have chosen to help highlight it? I mean, I'm just asking.
We've just chosen as an interim measure to spend $40 on a sign.
Okay, that's fine. I just was curious. A lot of people were asking about it.
I think that, they don't put signs up necessarily in our public space. I walked through, they had 5 signs around the grass, all pointing to the restroom. They didn't necessarily, public restroom was just pointing to the restroom. And then on the door was this very small font that said restroom. Overtly advertising it.
It seemed like the sign on their door should be a little larger. Since they agreed that it would be a public restroom, it should be clear that it's a public restroom. But we could ask them to make it a little better.
Take a look at it.
Yeah. Anything else for agenda management? John, I thought I saw you look up at me earlier. Were you trying to get my attention?
No.
Okay. All right. I see nothing else on the agenda. Do I have a motion to adjourn?
Moved.
Second.
Meeting adjourned at 12:31. John, do you have a minute? Yes. Come to you.
So were you